Chapter 726. For a moment, Zhu Hong thought that he was hallucinating. He closed his eyes and realized that the person didn't disappear. Instead, he was still coming over. And I've seen this face before. Chu Luiyue. Zhu Hong mumbled in disbelief. Chu Luiyue was already in front of him. When he saw Zhu Hong's situation clearly, Chu Luiyue's expression froze. Half of his body had already sunk into the black swamp, and he was dragging 4 people behind him. From the looks of it, they seemed to have fainted, and it was all thanks to Zhu Hong tying them together with a rope that they were not separated from each other. However, Zhu Hong's face was pale, and he was barely breathing. He seemed to have exhausted all his energy and couldn't hold on any longer. Chu Luiyue immediately reached out his hand. Zhu Hong, give me your hand. Looking at the fair and tender hand in front of him, Zhu Hong finally realized that this was really Chu Luiyue. Zhu Hong reached out his hand in a daze. Lei Laosi hurriedly went forward, grabbed Zhu Hong's wrist, and lifted him up forcefully. How can I let His Highness do this? Lei Laosi was strong and had innate divine strength, so he easily dragged them out. Before Zhu Hong could react, he had already broken free from that terrifying swamp. Lei Laosi set up a barrier and surrounded the few of them. This way they wouldn't fall so easily again. Chu Luiyue smiled and glanced at Lei Laosi. Thank you for your help, big brother Lei. Lei Laosi's eyes twitched. I haven't seen His Highness for such a long time. When did he become so fond of joking? When he heard him calling him big brother, his legs really turned to jelly. Why, you're welcome. It's what I should do. Lei Laosi coughed and turned his head away. Chu Luiyue teased him as her lips curled up slightly. Then, she looked at Zhu Hong and the few people he brought along. They were indeed from Dragon Teeth Mountain. Chu Luiyue took out a bottle of pills and passed it to Zhu Hong. Replenish your energy first. Zhu Hong subconsciously raised his hand and received the elixir. He opened the cork, and a rich fragrance wafted out. Zhu Hong was shocked. The level of this pill was not
Chapter
low,
736.
and the ingredients used to
This was the
refine
first
it were
time
extremely
Jiang Yuqing called her
precious.
this.
It was
And Chu
extremely
Luiyue
difficult
spent
for an
a lot of
ordinary
effort
person
to
to
control her
contain
expression.
even one pill.
What's wrong with this
But
fellow?
Chu Luiyue,
However,
actually had an
Song Qingyan
entire
at the side
bottle.
was greatly
Moreover,
shocked.
she gave it to him
Why you
so
just called her
casually, which
Jiang
showed
Yuqing
how
looked generous
gentle
she
and
was.
polite.
But
Zhu
Zhu
Hong
Hong very
was a
arrogant.
little embarrassed,
Especially now
but when
that
he
his
saw his
status is
current
different.
situation, it's
He
even harder
only
for
hesitated
hesitated
for
for
a
a
moment
moment before choosing
But now
to
he
accept.
actually called
The pill
Chu
melted
Luiyue
as
so
soon as it entered
intimately.
his mouth.
When did the relationship
relationship
between the two of them
spread
become
from his
so
chest
close?
to his limbs.
Jiang
and
Yuqing
bones.
glanced at Song
Very
Qingyan
soon,
and
Zhu
smiled
Hong's
lightly
complexion
as he
became
explained,
much better.
Oh, right.
He looked at Chu
You
Luiyue
probably don't
with
know,
a
but
complicated
when I met with
expression.
Danger previously,
I really don't know
I
how to
relied
thank
on
you
Lu Yu to
When I
help me
came
escape.
here, I originally
Speaking of
wanted to
which,
help Chu Luiyue.
I owe her
and
half
the
my
others.
life.
Mu
Who would
Qing
have
Ha
thought that
and
in
the
the
rest
end,
had
purple
all
shall
be the
be
ones
the
to help
their
their
own
own
eyes.
I remember
So
that
now
they wanted to
naturally
find
we
trouble
this
with
unit.
Miss Chu.
As
You
for
look
the
at Lei
rest,
and Laos,
they
they
had
had
more
more
or
or
less
less accepted.
I'm
I'm
afraid
afraid
the
that
bad
this
guys
man
are
was
making the first
definitely
move
so they
with
couldn't
them.
thank
These
her.
people
However,
didn't speak
but
loud,
strength,
but the
was
space was
extremely
dim and
Song
narrow.
Qingyan,
So
just by
any
standing in
sound
front
could
of
be
her,
heard
one
clearly.
could
At the
feel the
side,
Song
faint
Qingyan.
Yang
pressure.
Qingyan widened her
When did
eyes
Chu
and
Luiyue
embarrassed,
know
and
she
she
felt
forgot to
as if
cry.
there was a dagger at his
While
side.
you're saying
big brother
Jiang
Jiang
Yuqing
Yuqing
saved you,
We accidentally
Qingyan
met him in the
Qingyan
mystic
it seems like you misunderstood
us a lot.
Jiang Yuqing nodded.
She
Song
then looked
Qingyan's
away
the
crowd
crowd was
behind
stuck
him.
in his chest.
This
Actually,
is
after an
people
intense,
behind
he's in
to be
charge
able
of
to
leading the
struggle.
team.
Almost
He
dragging
finally
peace
accepted
mountain
his
is
fate.
Chu Luiyue's
Lei
ability to
Laosi
lower
sized
our
Zhu
limit.
Hong
Probably.
up. So she
Zhu Hong
naturally
just
instantly
wanted to
became
brush
nervous.
this matter aside.
However,
You little brat,
Lei
no one
Laosi
quite
denied
crossed
that
his
she had
arms.
played the
Lei
most
Laosi
crucial
struck
role
lazy
in this
That's
process.
right. You think it's
You're
over
Song
with just a
Qingyan, he could tell that
misunderstanding
Zhu
behind him.
Hong
He criticized
could
this only
totally
did he
engage
see
himself
that
if he
dense
wanted
now
to
that
have
things are
people.
clear.
However,
at a
you
rough
don't
still
intend to
chose to bring her
apologize
at
to
least
people.
who did Song
His
Qingyan's persistence
persistence
was
was
really hard.
But
in
in
this
this
situation,
Zhu
Zhu
Hong
Hong
didn't
had
seem
seen
to have
that
a
Song
second
Qingyan's
choice.
heart
His smile
suffered. He could
grew
only
huge.
brace
We're
himself
all
in
from
the same
Pact,
set,
speak
and he
to
did
Chu
so. This
Luiyue
is what
to
I
leave
should
it.
do.
But
The
the
person who
just
said
that
it was just a
this
short
was useless
one,
in the end.
but it seemed
So
he
he
had
had
no
no
choice
choice
but
but
to
to
leave
gap
with
his
his
teeth.
Recalling,
Then,
Lei
Chu
Laosi
Luiyue
returned the
is
jade
swift
bottle
and
and
decisive.
what did you
Chu
say?
You're
Song
too soft.
Qingyan
Chu
gradually
Luiyue
shook
shook
her
his
head.
senses.
Song
You
Qingyan
can
took
keep
a
this for
deep
now.
breath. Let's
It
go to
seems
another
like he
place.
raises
Chu
voice.
Luiyue really
I'm
has
sorry.
some
There seemed to be
ability.
a
misunderstood
warm,
not to mention
current
that Lei
surge
Laosi
in Zhu
the
Hong.
veins
He's
on
very
his
capable,
forehead,
lips
but he seemed to
move
listen to
faintly.
Chu
And in the
Luiyue a
end,
lot.
Yang
She only
Qingyan's
said
help
but was
too
originally
seemed
hiding behind him.
impossible.
Thank
That
you.
Chu
Hugging his
Luiyue
arm
could
and
do
grabbing
all
his
of
hand.
this.
Let's go over there
With both
first.
hands.
As for why she
Song
was
Qingyan
very
used
worried about
so
you. That's
much
because she
strength
wasn't
that he
swept
argued
out
with
from
her
consciously held.
Zhu
She
Hong
only
widened
came
his
down
eyes
as
and
one
shut
find
tightly.
one.
Chu
Her
Luiyue
expression
naturally
changed
gave it
and was about
she
to
almost
explanation
shouted
of the
out
situation With
The
her
sound of
hand
something
bones were breaking.
he
He
said
said
it
it
calmly.
was heard.
Chu
But it
Lua
was like
watched
Yue's
smashed
as if he was
his
watching a
bones
show.
hard.
And she looked
At this
although she was a
moment,
little
a tree
surprised
finally
that was
understood
thick and
how
how
laughable the
suddenly
words she didn't
swung
feel
over.
anything in
Earlier
her
it was
heart
very
and even
aggressive.
felt
In front of
a
Jiang
little- it was
Yuqing,
extremely fast.
However,
I've become a joke
since
since
Jiang's
everyone
expression
admitted
admitted
that he
owed her a favor.
Son Qingyan
This
hurriedly
thing
glanced
is
over.
dangerous. It would be a waste if
They were
as
entangled
expected
by this thing.
He discovered that many
took
people
and that's why they
looking
ended up in
forward
such
unafraid
pointed in a
gazes.
certain
Chu
direction.
Yue's
Most of them were
gaze
actually some commotion over
guards
here
as she
swung her
whispers could be
hand.
heard.
Is it because
The
of
sharp
those
dagger
Chu
flew out
people?
very warm.
Chu Lua
That
followed
tree's
his
been
helping
actually
people along
split
the way.
open
He
from
was
the
referring to
middle.
two people who died.
The red juice
I think so
instantly
too.
exploded.
That's right.
The
Chu
bloody
Lua
smell
nodded
was so
and
thick
briefly
that it was
explained
almost
what had happened.
suffocating. Of course,
That tree
it was
root
inevitable that
swung
she would
wildly,
mention that she
as if it wanted to get
help,
closer,
but was rejected by
Lua
Song
sneered.
Qingyan. The next
Chu
moment,
Lua
two
spoke
thin
casually,
flying daggers
as if he did not
suddenly
take it to heart.
flew out from the
However,
dagger.
two
everyone's
consecutive
ears,
sounds were
they
heard.
felt that Song
That tree root
Qingyan
was
did
actually
not
cut
know
off.
what was good for him.
Bam!
He
Two
actually
pieces
had
of
the
the
tree
chief to
root
complain about
fell
Chu
together.
Lua. The
Just
swamp
now,
surged, and
although no
quickly
one
drowned.
said anything.
Chu Lua
They all felt some
raised her
disdain
hand.
for Song
The dagger
Qingyan
flew
in
back.
their hearts.
The two
Song
flying
Qingyan
daggers that were
fell
as thin
as if he was sitting
as
on Cicadas'
cicadas'
wings
and
had
needles.
also quickly
This was the
returned.
first time he felt
It was
so
clean,
embarrassed,
and not a
in
single
front
mark
of
was
his
left
people.
on it. If not
Chu
for the
Lua
fact
looked
that
at
he
it
was
with
worried about
satisfaction
encountering
and put
more
away the
danger,
dagger.
he would have
The
left
entire process
immediately.
was smooth and smooth.
Yang
Zhu
Qing
was dumbfounded.
gently tugged at his
Just now,
sleeve. and
Just now,
said
what did Chu
softly,
Lua do? Only then did Song
She actually
Qingyan
managed to
let
get
go of her
rid
hand.
of the berserk tree
Yang
root
Qing
so
Er's wrist
easily.
was almost broken.
Chu Lua
She
took
looked
a
down
deep
nervously
look at that
and
half
saw
of
that
the
there
tree
seemed to be a
root that
red
had
blood
escaped
stain on her
smile.
sleeve.
Let's
She
go.
was shocked and
At the same
immediately
time,
wanted to bandage
in another
it.
place,
The other party
Shangguan
seems to
Wan
have become
groaned,
stronger than
and a
before.
trace of blood
We have to
flowed
hurry.
out from the corner
Upon
of her
hearing
mouth.
this,
Her
Yang
expression
Qing's
expression
shocked and
changed
angry.
slightly.
Her face
She
was
suddenly
flushed
said
with blood,
hesitantly, and her
"Are you looking for the
expression
person
was
controlling the
distorted.
tree branch?"
The strange
I
black
remember that the
rune
tree
between his
root
eyebrows
flew from that
also
direction.
began to shake
As she
along
spoke,
with it.
someone
She
actually
raised her
managed
hand
to block
and
her
pointed
attack
in a direction.
so easily.
It was dark all
Those
around,
people were all
and no one knew
geniuses
what she was
with the
pointing
Daijing
at.
Yuan Meridian.
Jiang Yuqing frowned
Originally,
slightly. They were already
Really?
at her fingertips.
Yang Qing,
but she didn't
nodded
expect.
timidly.
Who?
Chu
Who is it?
Lua narrowed her
Shangguan Wan
eyes
gritted her
and was
teeth.
about to speak,
Although her
when she
detection
suddenly
range
felt
was
an
very
inch by her
wide,
ear.
and
She
almost
turned to look
covered
at
the
Dumpling,
entire mystic forest,
only to see
there was
Dumpling
one very
flying
important
straight
point.
ahead.
She could
Target.
only sense the
Yang
existence
Qing
of those who
Chu
were bound
Lua
by
found
one
it strange.
As
As
for
for
the
the
others,
others, about to ask
she
Dumpling to
couldn't
come
know.
back when
Therefore,
Dumpling flew
she
over
couldn't
Yang
guess who did
Qing.
it.
However,
head.
Yang
However,
Qing was
there were a
frightened
few
and
people who
screamed.
were not in
She
this
retreated in a
range from the
hurry,
very beginning.
but Dumpling
Chu
flapped
Lua
her wings
in the group, and she
Shangguan
fell.
Wan couldn't help
Don't touch
but
me.
suspect Chu
She
Lua,
shouted in panic,
but she was
suddenly
little
felt a
uncertain,
sharp pain
because
on
she
her
didn't
wrist.
think that Chu
Rip,
Lua
half
half
her
her
such
sleeve was
strength.
torn off.
Could it be?
A terrifying
There were other
scarlet
powerful
wound on her
existences
wrist
here
was
that she
exposed
didn't
in
know.
front of everyone.
Shangguan Wan
A
was
strong
puzzled.
smell of blood
However,
suddenly
she
erupted.
only struggled
It was
for a while
extremely
and
similar to the
temporarily
smell
put this matter
of the tree
aside.
root.
If this group
Mobile
of people
users
couldn't do it,
please
then it'd
browse
be
and
fine
read.
to change
A
people.
better reading
The
experience
Yuan
comes from
Meridian in
Love
her
Network.
body had already recovered by a quarter.
It wouldn't be long before it was completely
Chapter
healed.
737.
A faint green light
Everything
flashed
happened
through
too
Shangguan
quickly.
Wan's eyes.
When a wound on her wrist
Digression.
tore open again,
6
Yang
o'clock.
Qing knew it was
Torturing
bad.
scum is very
Song
fast.
Qingyan,
Mobile
originally
users
wanted to help
please
her up,
browse for a
but his
better reading
expression
experience
changed
from Love
slightly
Network.
when he smelled the smell.
Chapter
What happened to you?
27.
A fierce
Chu
look flashed
Lua
across
just
Yang
turned
Qing's
around
eyes
and was about to leave
without another
when
word.
Zhu Hong
She
suddenly
turned and
stopped
fled.
him.
Her speed
Chu
was
Lua
actually much
turned around
faster than the
and
realm
looked at
she
him
had displayed
in
before.
confusion.
Dumpling
Why?
immediately
Is there anything else?
followed.
In the blink
Zhu
of an
Hong
eye,
frowned.
it rushed to the
hesitantly
opposite side
pointed
of
in the
Yang
direction
Qing
it came from.
It flapped
Actually,
its wings.
when we came over
a
just
scarlet
now,
flame suddenly
we met a group
flew
of
out
black cavalry
and condensed
There were
into
about
a
a dozen
barrier
of
in
them,
the air.
and their
Yang
situation
Qing
wasn't
was caught off
optimistic.
guard.
We were
By
too
the
far
time
away
she
back
discovered
then,
the flame
so we missed
boundary
them.
in front of her.
I don't know how they are now.
It was already too
Chu
late
Lua
to stop.
paused.
In
You
a
want us to
panic,
go
she
and
could
help
only
them?
throw out a
Zhu
wave
Hong
of
looked
force.
hesitant, wanting
At
to use
first,
the
he
rebound
didn't have
force
this
to
thought,
avoid the flame.
but he saw that
However,
Lei Laosi
jealousy
The
was
flames
extremely
spread
powerful,
extremely
and
quickly.
Chu Yuyua's combat
Yang
power wasn't to
or
be
had just turned
underestimated.
around when she
So he had
realized
this
that she
thought.
was completely
He actually didn't have
trapped in a
much to
cage
do
formed
with those
by
black
flames.
cavalry.
He
The
just felt that it would be a
scorching
pity
heat
if they
roasted her,
died,
and
just
her
like that.
entire body
However,
was burning.
he also
She
knew
clenched
that
her
he was
teeth
asking too much
and set up a boundary
in this
around
godforsaken
herself.
place.
However,
it was already very
how could her
difficult
boundary
for a
resist the
person to
power
protect
of a
their
divine
own life.
beast like Dumpling?
How would they have
Not
the extra
long later,
strength?
her
to help
boundary
others?
began to shake.
If he had
as
this
if it would
ability,
explode,
he would
at
do it
any
himself.
Chu Luiwe
Unfortunately,
quickly rushed over.
Even he had to rely
Yang
on Chu
Qin,
Luiwe
and the
thoughts
rest to barely
flashed,
survive
and
now.
she looked at Song
He already
Qingyan
owed
with
them enough.
tears in her eyes.
So how could he still ask
Senior
them
brother
to do
Qingyan,
anything?
Save me.
No.
Song
Zhu
Qingyan
Hong
was
was
also
silent for a
secretly
while
puzzled
and finally
However,
shook his head. When he saw Yang
just as he
Qin,
spoke,
he was interrupted by
appearance.
Chu Lui.
He felt pity for her.
Were they?
He hurriedly
What?
said.
Zhu Hong looked at Chu
Lui
Lui in shock,
who had just rushed
and couldn't
over.
react for a moment.
Chu Lui.
When Chu Lui
Hurry up
saw his expression
and have a magical
how could she not
beast
tell
release
what he
her?
was thinking?
If this goes on,
There's also the
Qin
Black
won't be able to
Cavalry's
take it.
Deputy General
However,
Mu Qinghe
Chu
in our
Lui
group.
acted as if she
So it's
didn't hear
reasonable
him
for us to go and
walk
save
straight to the cave
As she
formed
spoke,
by flames.
she looked at Lei Lao.
Song Qingyin was
Big
anxious.
Brother Lei, without
Please
thinking,
invite everyone
he reached
over.
out to pull
We'll go
Chu
together.
Lui. Okay.
You didn't
Lei
listen to what I
Lao
said.
wasn't interested
Chu
in this
Lui
matter.
suddenly
But
turned
since
her
her
head
highness
and
had
looked
this
over.
plan, he
Song
naturally
Qingyin's
wouldn't
movements
shirk from it.
suddenly
Lei
paused.
Lao turned around.
The young girl in
and
front of
quickly
him
ran
had a
back.
cold expression.
Seeing Lei Lao's
and her gaze
figure
was
disappearing
as sharp
quickly.
as a knife.
Zhu Hong finally
However,
returned to his
this
senses
cold
and looked
indifferent
at Chu
gaze
Lui in shock.
made him feel a
Do
deep
you really want to
chill
go from the bottom
Did
of his
Chu
heart?
Lui
Song
not know how
Qingyin's
much
hand
energy
froze
it would
in
take
midair,
to save
but he
people
couldn't
in this
continue to
place?
reach forward.
Why not?
Chu Lui
The corners of Chu
seemed to be
Lui
even more
Yue's
difficult
lips
to
curled
provoke
up
than he thought.
slightly. While he
Her
was in a
eyes were
daze,
clear.
Chu
And there was a
Lui
sense of
already
valiance
retracted
between
her
her
warning
brows.
gaze.
These
and
black
looked at
cavalry
Yang Qin,
soldiers were indeed
with a cold
led by
expression.
Mu Qinghe.
What's with the injury on your
But at the end of the
wrist?
day,
Yang
they
Qin
were once her
turned her
soldiers.
head.
I was just
Shang Wan
accidentally
wanted to
scratched
use
by
these
a
people
tree
to
root.
seize their
It's
strength
nothing, oh,
and seek a
Chu
future
Lui
for
asked
herself.
faintly.
He had to ask
Then
her
the
if
smell
she agreed
just
to it
now
first.
was also
Zhu Hong
accidentally
stared
contaminated
blankly at
by
the
it.
woman in front of
That's
him.
strange.
She clearly
The
had
smell
the
just now
appearance of a
it seems to be coming
peerlessly
from your wound.
beautiful young
That was
girl.
definitely
And
not
there
a
was even a
normal
smile
bloody
on her
smell.
face. But for some unknown reason,
That
her
smell
body
was
actually
exactly the
carried
same
a faint
as the
smell
noble
she
aura,
had when she had cut
as if
open
she was
the
looking
roots.
down
This
upon
could only
the world.
mean that, for a moment,
Yang Qin,
Zhu
her
Hong's body
felt
had also
extremely
devoured
at
the
ease.
power of these roots.
It was as if
But
she
how
would
did she
definitely
do it?
be able to save
Even Jiang
everyone
Yuqing and the rest
she
avoided
said
these tree
she was going to
roots.
save
But
them.
Yang
This
Qin
kind of nobility
was the
and
exact
pride
opposite.
emitted from her bones.
Yang Qin
definitely
her clenched
wasn't
teeth.
something that ordinary
She wanted to
people
defend
could
herself.
have. But
Didn't they say
Lui
that
Chu
stared at her
Lui came
as
from
if she
an
could
ordinary
see
background?
through everything?
But from the looks of it now,
At such a time,
it was very
no matter
different
what
from
she
the
said,
rumors. It would be like a
recalling
joke.
how he said
seeing that
that
Yang
he would
Qin
take care
didn't
of these
say
people
anything
in
Song
Chongqing Pavilion.
panicked.
Zhu Hong's
Qin, what
face
exactly is
flushed a
going
little.
on? All
She
of
was
them
clearly
had
still
probably
trapped in the
underestimated
entanglement
Chu
of
Lui
those tree roots just now.
Lei Lao
so quickly brought the rest
but
of
Yang
the people
Qin
over.
refused
When
to say
Mu Hong
anything.
Yu saw Zhu
Chu
Hong
Lui
and the
pondered
rest
for a
in
while,
sorry state,
and suddenly
she was
took a
worried
step
and
forward.
hurriedly asked,
Lei Lao
Senior
followed
brother
her
Zhu
hurriedly.
Hong, "How are
Chu
you
Lui
guys?"
turned to look
"We're
at him
fine,"
and shook
"We're
his
fine."
head gently.
Just now,
I'll ask
Lu
her.
and Lei,
Don't worry.
big brother,
Lei Lao could
saved
only
us,
stop,
and even
but
gave us
everyone,
elixirs.
including
We're
him,
fine now.
was staring at
When
Chu
Zhu Hong
Lui
saw that
closely.
Mu Hong Yu
Chu
was
Lui
safe and
narrowed
sound,
her eyes.
he heaved a
and a
sigh
guess
of
flashed
relief.
across her mind.
It's good that you guys are safe
Previously,
and sound.
there was a period of time
when we first saw that you guys were missing.
We
We
were
were
still
quite
rather
close
worried.
to Shang Wan.
But from the looks of it now,
and she would even
those
cook
worries
porridge
were
for Shang Wan.
unnecessary.
Back
From
then,
the looks of it,
Chu Lui
the few people
felt
who
that
followed
something
Chu
was amiss.
Lui were
As
clearly
the third
safest.
princess,
Mu
Shang
Hong
Wan
Yu
Wan had
then
someone to
heaved a
take
sigh of
care of
relief.
everything in the palace.
Other than Zhu Hong,
Since when did
the
she
others
lack
were
someone to
still
cook porridge for her?
unconscious and in a
Shang
sorry
Wan
state.
Wan said
But
that she
looking
got
at Zhu
along
Hong's
well
appearance,
with Yang Qin.
he did seem to be much
so she
better.
let her stay in the palace.
We had
for
an
a few
accident
more
back
days.
then.
But
Forget
even
it.
a fool
All
wouldn't
these aren't
believe
important.
this.
We'll
What
talk
was
about
even
it in the
stranger was
future.
that those days
The most
were
important
actually
thing
when
is
Yang
that everyone
Qin
is fine.
testified
Mu
that
Hong Yu
Chu
looked at
Lui
Chu
took away the
Lui
long
gratefully.
yuan sword.
Lu
It
Yu,
was proven to be
thank you so
false.
much.
According to
Chu Lui
Shang Wan
smiled
Wan's
gently.
temper. Not
Zhu
only did she
Hong
not
and the
punish
rest
Yang
helped us
Qin
previously,
but she
so
even
it's
kept
only
her
right
by
for
her
them
side.
to help us now.
Chu
Zhu Hong was
opened her
instantly
mouth
embarrassed
and
Chu
said something
Lui
silent.
isn't talking about the
As her
incident
back was
where he
facing
stood
the
up for
crowd.
us at
Only Yang
Pingyang
Qin
Square, saw her words.
What kind of help can
Shang
that be
Wan
considered?
used your yuan
Chu
meridian,
Lui
didn't
saved
she?
our lives.
Yang Qin
Zhu
widened
Hong,
her eyes in shock.
You said that there's
as
a
if she had
portion
seen
of
a
the Black
ghost.
Cavalry over there.
They had done this
Mu
very
Qinghe
secretly.
directly asked
How could
in
Chu
a
Lui
deep
voice?
voice.
Seeing
Zhu Hong's
Yang
expression
Qin,
also became
Er's reaction
much more serious.
Chu Lui was
as he nodded.
instantly certain
I
of
did
her
see some
guess.
people just now,
as expected,
but I don't know if they're
Shang
still
Wan
there.
Wan had already
But it
made
hasn't
a
been
move
too
on
long,
Yang Qin
so we should be able to
from
find
then
them
on.
smoothly.
It was normal
Mu
for her
Qinghe
to want to
nodded.
do this.
Then I'm
But why would
afraid
Yang
I'll have to
Qin
trouble you
agree
to lead the way.
Could it be that she was
Vice
Vice Admiral Meng wants power? Zhu Hong immediately remembered Yang Qin after saying that. Er's expression, he lifted his foot and was about to walk in that direction. It didn't seem like she was forced. Stop. Moreover, after such a long time, other than Elder Qin, Er's body his expression was very sour as he looked much in other aspects. Vice Admiral looking at the strength she displayed, are you really going to save those people now? She didn't seem Have you forgotten that our top priority gaze landed on the third princess, Yang Qin? If we all go to save the Black Cavalry suddenly, her gaze happened to the third princess. The strength in Yang Qin, matter of finding the third princess came for delayed. Because of this, Vice Admiral Mu, can you bear? Although I don't know what method the two of them used, I can be
A trace
sure
of
that.
impatience
Yang
and
Qin's
viciousness
strength
finally
would become
appeared
stronger
on
along with
Mu
Shang
Qing's
Wan's
strength,
which had never
Then,
changed for the past
Shang
10,000 years.
might already
I never
know the
said that I
situation
wouldn't
here.
look for the third
Chu
princess.
Luiwei retreated,
but now there's
without
no news of
hesitation.
the third princess.
Yang Qin
and there's no
suddenly
clue
looked
at
up
all.
and sneered.
Even if we look for
Want
her,
to escape?
where are we going
It's
to
too
find
late.
her? As
A
the
black
deputy
rune
general of the
suddenly
Black Cavalry,
flashed across her
I
glabella
naturally have the
and
responsibility
disappeared in an
to
instant.
save my
The
own
next moment,
soldiers.
her
Elder
aura
Qiushi
started to
has always
surge.
been worried about
Qin
the third
Yi's
princess.
expression changed.
Why don't you look for her
and
yourself?
he immediately said,
You.
Retreat.
Elder Qiushi's
She's going to
face turned
self-destruct.
red and white.
Before
He
he
was
could
about to
finish
curse
his
when he
sentence,
met Mu
he had
Qing
already
his
rushed
fierce and
towards
cold
Chu
gaze.
Luiwei.
His heart
Lei
trembled,
Laosi
and he
also
swallowed
sensed
the
that
rest
something
of
was
his words.
amiss, and
If
immediately
Elder Qiushi
ran.
doesn't plan
However,
to look for the third
the two of them were
princess
still
herself
one step too
and
late.
wants to follow
Boom.
us,
A
then
loud
please don't
explosion
mention
was
this
heard.
again in the future.
A turbulent
We know
and
very
violent
well what we
energy
should do
spread
and
out
what we shouldn't
in
do.
all directions.
There's no need for
in an
Elder
instant,
Qiushi
flames
to guide
filled
us.
the sky.
Mu Qing, his
When Yang
words were
Qin,
very
Er's
rude,
physical
and
body
she
was
didn't
destroyed,
leave Elder
a black
Qiushi
ripple
any
appeared in
face
the
at
air.
all.
A
Elder
strong
Qiushi
suction
had
force
never
came
been
from
insulted
inside.
in public like this
It
before.
instantly swallowed,
and he could only
Chu
gnash
Luiwei.
his teeth in
Her
hatred.
figure disappeared
He looked
in
at
front
Jiang
of
Yuqi,
everyone's eyes,
but he saw that Jiang
Lu
Yuqi
Yu
didn't intend
Ms.
to
Chu.
speak. Everyone
Clearly,
exclaimed
he was also
in
on Mu
unison.
Qing's side.
Elder
The moment
Qiushi
Yang Qin
secretly hated him.
self-destructed.
Mu Qinghe
Dumpling
had been
instantly
very low-key
flew over
for more
and
than a
blocked
year,
in front
especially
of Chu
because of
Luiwei.
her previous
The next
identity
moment, Chu
as the
Luiwei
Empress
felt her
concubine's
vision turn
confidant.
black. She was
And she was
cautious in her
instantly
words and
dragged into
actions.
darkness by
Because of this,
some force.
Elder Qiushi
However,
felt that he was
just
superior
as she was
to
about
Mu
to
Qinghe.
retaliate,
He didn't
suddenly
expect
realize
that when
that
he
the
became
violent
tough,
force
he was still the
isolated
same
outside.
as before.
A barrier
Mu Qinghe
was
looked
emitting a
at
lustrous
Zhuhong.
glow.
Please lead the way.
Protecting her with
Mobile
it.
users,
Chu Luiwei
please
blinked.
browse and read.
Crystal barrier?
A better reading
Why did it come out by
experience
itself
comes from
before
Love
I could
Network.
even move?
Digression. There's only one
Chapter
more chapter
728.
I feel embarrassed to
under
keep
Zhu
everyone
Hong's
waiting.
lead,
I'll update
everyone
it tomorrow
moved
at
forward
noon.
together
Mobile
and
users
rushed in the
please
direction
browse
they
and
came
read.
from.
A better
After
reading
being
experience
scolded,
comes from
Elder
Love Web.
Qiushi
finally shut his mouth obediently. This time, everyone's ears
Chapter
could finally be at
738.
peace.
Just
Zhu
as
Hong
Chu
had
Luiwei
fed each
had
of
this
this
question in her heart,
and it didn't take
she
long
saw
for
a
them to
light
wake up
spot
one
appear in
after
front of
another
her.
on the way. The
The
surrounding
surrounding
space began
their
to
injuries weren't
squeeze
too
towards
serious.
her.
Chu
With the effects
Luiwei's
of Chu
expression
Luiwei's
was
pills,
slightly
they could
restrained
barely keep
as she
up.
circulated
After
the
a period of
force in her
time,
body.
Zhu
The next
Hong
moment,
finally stopped.
the light in
but his
front of her
brows
brightened up,
slowly
almost at the
furrowed.
same time.
That was because
the crystal
there
barrier
were only a suddenly
few corpses
transformed
left
into
that were
countless
almost
streams of
completely
light
submerged,
and
From their
silently
clothes
entered
and
Chu
faces,
Luiwei's
they were
body.
indeed the
Chu
Black
Luiwei
Cavalry.
was shocked. However,
Just as she was about to
the
take
other
a
people
closer
nowhere
look,
to be found.
she suddenly
Those
felt
people
that her
from
entire
before
body
all
was
here.
pulled.
Why are there
out of
only
the
these
narrow
few
and
left now?
cramped space?
Muttered Zhu Hong.
Her body
Mu
staggered,
Qinghe
and it
looked
took her a
around,
lot of effort,
and
to
her
stand
face
firm.
was so
Chu
cold that it
Luiwei
seemed
quickly
like there was a
glanced
layer
around.
of frost.
The
on it.
surroundings were constantly
This black swamp
surging
is
black
flowing
swamp.
much faster
The
than
smell
before.
of blood
Chu
and
Luiwei
decay
and the
was
others
almost
hadn't been here
suffocating.
before.
So
She
they
could
couldn't
vaguely
compare.
see
However,
many mutilated
the remaining
corpses.
people,
There were
including
countless
Jiang
dancing
Yuqi
tree
and
roots
the
above.
others,
They
all
were
of
of different
realized this
thicknesses,
after taking a closer
but all
look.
of them were scarlet
As expected.
in color.
Perhaps
Under her
it's because
feet
of this
was a
that
cold
those people
and
left
hard
this
stone
place.
platform.
Guess
Chu
Zhu
Luiwei's
I just don't know
eyes
how they're
moved
doing
slightly.
now.
It
If
was
they're
almost
still
all
alive,
swamps below.
everything will be fine.
The existence
But if
of this
they're dead,
platform was
it should be
particularly
because of the
special.
movements
If she
caused
guessed
by that mother
correctly,
tree.
this
As
should
Mu
be.
Qinghe spoke,
It's really
she looked up ahead.
a sarcastic
That was the
and
direction
cold voice
where the
came
black
from behind
swamp
her.
was flowing.
Chu Luiwei,
After
couldn't
stopping
be more
for a
familiar
while,
with this voice.
he took the lead.
She
and
turned
walked
around.
forward.
A woman was
However,
standing in front
Chu
of her.
Luiwei purposely
There was a
slowed
faint
down
black barrier
and walked
around
to
her,
Qin Yi's side,
blurring her face.
Big Brother
and
Qin,
figure. The seal you
However,
mentioned just now.
Chu Luiwei
What
could
exactly
still
is
see
he
at a
referring
glance
to? That it was
Qin,
Shang Wan.
he lightly shook
Next to her
his head.
feet, there was something.
I only know that there's a
Chu
seal
Luiwei
below,
looked over,
but I
and her
haven't seen it
pupils
personally,
shrank slightly.
so I'm not very
That
clear
was her
about
pure
it.
gold
As he
armor.
spoke,
Without
he
a
glanced
doubt,
at Tuan's
it was
Z
brought
column.
by Shang Wan.
Chu Luiwei's heart
Shang
skipped a beat.
Wan had already
What he
taken
means is
everything
Dumpling might
that
know a
once
thing
belonged
or
to her.
two.
How could she
Dumpling
let go
blinked.
of the pure
Chu
gold
Luiwei
armor?
calmed down.
It was just
It
that
seemed that
looking
it
at it
did
now,
have some understanding.
was a little strange.
Dumpling, the pure
Why
gold
didn't you
armor,
tell me before?
was extremely
Chu
noble.
Luiyue asked
In the
inwardly.
entire
Dumpling
Tianling
buried her
dynasty,
head
there was
in her
probably
shoulder
no other armor
because
that
it
could
didn't want her to
compare
go.
it. It had been
Logically
here for a
speaking,
long time,
Shangwan Wan
and
should
had
value
vaguely
this thing
guessed
very
something.
much.
There was
Now, it
probably
was just
something
casually
casually
placed
placed
on
on
the
the ground.
ground.
That was not to be
There seemed to be
trifled
some
with.
messy blood
From the
stains
very
on the
beginning,
ground beside
it did not want
Chu
Chu
Luiyue
Luiyue
calmly
to be
withdrew
involved
his
in this matter.
gaze and
That was
looked
why
at
he didn't
Shangwan
say
Wan.
anything.
Chu
Even peeping in
Luiyue
the dark.
patted its head.
Did you
with a
enjoy
slightly
watching?
restrained
Shangwan
expression.
Wan asked
Dumpling had
sarcastically.
already broken
Chu
through
Luiyue raised
to
his
become a
eyebrows
divine
slightly.
beast now.
It seemed that
To be able to
Shangwan
make
Wan
it
had
so
already guessed that
fearful,
she was the
it
one
was
who
most
had done
likely
those
not
things
simple.
before.
The
In
corners of
Shangwan
Chu
Wan,
Luiyue's
she
lips
vaguely
curled
felt
into
that
a
something
faint
was wrong.
smile.
However,
Third princess,
since they were already
you
here,
misunderstood.
there was no
I
way
wasn't
to
spying
retreat.
on you.
They could only just helping everyone find you. The group continued forward. I only took a quick glance. They were very fast and was unable to determine
After
your
about
location.
half an hour,
I didn't expect to come here directly
hear
this
some
time.
movement in front.
If eldest
Mu
young
Ching-ha
master
immediately
Jiang
looked
and the
over
others knew
and
that
saw
I
a
found
group
you,
of
they would be
faint
very
figures.
happy. It was the
Shang
black
Wan
cavalry.
didn't want to listen to
However,
a single word.
the number of
Chu
people
Luiwei
seemed to
said,
be much
and
more
she
than what
wouldn't
Zhu
believe it
Hong
either.
had said earlier. At a rough glance, there were
you
at least
threatening
more
me?
than 100 people.
Shang Wan's
Mu
expression was
Ching-ha
cold.
was about to
It was
go
fine
over
if it was
when
Jiang
she
Yuqing,
suddenly
but the
realized
others
that there were
definitely
tree
couldn't
roots
know that she was
tightly
here,
wrapped
let alone what
around
she was
those
doing.
people.
Third
Especially
princess,
those people
why do you
outermost.
say that?
Almost
Just an
all of
ordinary
them were
person.
covered in scales.
How can I threaten you?
And were on the verge of
As
death.
Chu Luiwei spoke,
a few of them were
he
even
glanced around
unconscious.
unintentionally.
She didn't know if
Ever
they had
since you
fainted
disappeared,
or
we've been
the
very
tree
worried.
roots seemed to
For
be
this
trying
reason,
to separate them.
we didn't
But the
hesitate
soldiers
to try
were
our
still
best to
hugging
barge
each
in
other tightly.
and even encountered
They continued to
many dangers.
entangle
Many
with those
sect
crazy
disciples
tree
and black
roots.
cavalry.
This
were
scene actually seemed a
entangled
bit
by those tree
solemn
roots.
and stirring.
Their deaths
The people
were really
who followed
tragic.
all
It's
fell
great
into
that you're
silence.
safe and sound.
Looking at this scene,
Shang Wan
they couldn't
stared
hide
at
their
Chu
shock.
Luiwei.
Mu
Mu
Ching's
Ching's
expression
expression
was
terrifyingly
Then,
cold.
she suddenly sneered.
She immediately
In the
wanted to go
silent
forward.
and cold space.
Vice Admiral
This sound
Mu,
seemed
rushing
particularly
forward
rashly
abrupt
at
and
this
cold.
time.
Chu
I don't
Luiwei,
think it's appropriate.
you don't have to feign
Chu
civility
Luiwei suddenly
in front of me.
spoke.
You know
Mu Ching
better
had turned
than
around.
anyone how you came
Her gaze
here.
was as sharp
Yang
as a
Qing,
knife.
is
What are you
already
trying
dead.
to say?
What's the point
Chu
of saying
Luiwei
this?
smiled,
Hearing
and
this,
pointed at the
Chu
spot where the
Luiwei's
roots
expression
were intertwined.
faded. As long
It
as we
seems like
get
the
rid of
third
this
princess
thing,
has
we
admitted
can
that
naturally
Yang
rescue
Qing,
them. Otherwise,
Er's injuries
it's just
and
a
death
waste of effort.
are related to you.
Mu Ching
She
has
should have
stared
died
at Chu
long ago.
Luiwei for a while.
It's already her blessing
the
that I
anger
let her
and
stay
impulse in
for
her
a few
heart
more days.
finally, gradually
At this point,
suppressed.
Shang Wan
Chu
was
Luiwei was
very
right.
clear
In the
that
current
Chu
situation,
Luiwei had probably
they could only
guessed many
use their
things,
wits and
therefore,
not force.
she directly
the scene
brought
just now
Chu
had a
Luiwei
huge
over
impact
and
on
laid her
her.
cards on the table.
For a moment,
But
she
you,
actually almost
this is the
rushed
divine
forward.
beast you just
You have a
contracted?
way?
Shang
Chu
Wan
Luiwei
looked
nodded.
at Dumpling,
Yes.
who was on Chu Luiwei's
A tree root
shoulder.
flew over.
Her eyes were
Shang
filled
Wan
with
raised her
jealousy
hand
and
and lightly
drew
If
on
it
the
wasn't
tree
for
root.
Chu Luiwei,
The bright red,
this
liquid
divine beast
quickly
would have been
seeped
hers.
into her palm.
Then,
What a pity!
It entered the
Shang
dark
Wan
green
muttered
fireball
softly,
in her
her face
dantian.
filled with
The
dense,
tempered power
killing intent.
surged out from the
It was a
fireball
pity
again
that this divine
and spread
beast
to
had
Shang
already
Wan
been
Wan's
contracted
limbs
and couldn't
bones.
recognize
Sensing
a
that
new
another
master.
part of the Yuan meridian
So,
in her body
she
had
could
been
only kill it
restored.
together with her.
Shang Wan
It wasn't
let
easy
out
for a divine
long
beast
sigh.
to appear in
The
the world.
feeling of having
In the
power
end,
again was
not only
simply
could she not
too
take it for
satisfying.
herself,
She
she
even
already
had to take
couldn't
its
remember
life.
how
Shang
long
Wan
she had
Wan's
waited
hatred
for
for
this
Chu
day.
Luiwei deep.
As long as
Dumpling
she
seemed to be a
persevered
little
for while
agitated
and devoured
Chu
enough
Luiwei
power,
patted its
she would
head
be able to
gently
recover
and
completely.
comforted it in her heart.
Shang Wan
When she
Wan
discovered
flicked
that
the
Yang
tree root
Qing
away and looked at her
might be
hands.
colluding with
Her
Shang
skin
Wan
had
Wan.
gradually
She had
returned
already
to its
expected
normal
this
color from its
situation.
initial
Since
blood
Shang
red
Wan
color.
Wan
She
dared
believed
to
that it
say
wouldn't
these
be
words
long before
so
she could.
brazenly.
Suddenly,
It was obvious
Shang
that
Wan
she
Wan's
didn't
expression
intend
changed
to let her leave alive.
Her chest trembled
But
violently.
Shang Wan
Her legs
wanted
went
her life,
soft. It wasn't
and
that
she knelt
easy.
on the ground.
I remember that
The
you
pure
also have a
gold
sacred
Daijin
armor
meridian
hit the stone
and
platform
and
and
let out a
great as it
muffled
low,
sound.
Shang Wan Wan
Shang Wan
sized up
Wan's
Chu
eyes
Luiwei.
almost popped
Her
out of their
eyes filled with
sockets.
undisguised
The net that she had
greed
carefully
and
planned
excitement
was directly
Now,
cut off.
She only needed a little
That
bit
was
of
more than
strength
100 people
to completely
originally
restore her
as long
Yuan
as she
meridian.
succeeded this time.
Maybe
she
Chu
would
Luiwei
basically
could
be able to
complete it.
recover
After all,
completely.
Chu
But she was
Luiwei's
actually
strength
stopped by
had
someone
always
just
been
like
much
that.
stronger than
The
realm
energy
she
in
displayed.
Shang Wan
Plus,
Wan's chest
she had a divine
and abdomen
beast.
went
Chu
berserk,
Luiwei smiled,
almost tearing
but there
her
was no
internal
smile in her
organs
eyes.
apart. Blood kept flowing out from her mouth.
It seems that the third princess is very
red.
interested in my
Some even
Yuan
fell on
meridian.
the chest.
Shang
of the
Wan
pure
Wan
gold
couldn't be
sacred
bothered
armor.
to pretend
Who is it?
anymore. I will
It's your
cut you
honor
into
to be able to
pieces.
serve me.
Shang Wan Wan raised her
shouted
hand
herself
and
hoarse.
waved it forward.
The corners of her
A
eyes
dark
were
blue
scarlet,
origin power
and her
flew
face
out
was
in an
filled
instant.
with madness.
It went straight for Chu
Suddenly,
Luiwei.
the void
At the
in
same
front of her
time,
trembled
countless tree
violently.
roots flew over
Then,
from all
a
directions.
colorful stream
Whoosh
of light
Dumpling's
streaked
body
across.
flashed.
A
And
ball
she
of scarlet
instantly
flames
transformed
wrapped
into
into
her
her
vast
true
fora.
She flapped her
huge
huge wings.
Digression
and scarlet
12
flames
o'clock.
surged out.
Mobile users
All the tree
roots were easily brushed away.
A better reading
and retained by the
experience
Scarlet
comes from
Flames.
Love Network.
In an instant, the flames soared into the
Chapter
sky.
729.
The surrounding darkness
Shangwan
was
was
dispelled.
shocked.
It was
and
as bright as
immediately
day.
retreated.
A violent
At the same
wind
time,
blew.
she
It was
set up a
oppressive.
barrier in front of her.
Shangwan Wan
She didn't know if
clenched
it was
her
because of the
fists tightly,
fireball,
but the
and her
barrier
heart
she set
was
up
filled
now
with
had
hatred.
a faint green
Even
color.
though there was a barrier
Boom.
in front of her,
That scarlet
she could
flame
still feel
hit
the
the barrier
terrifying
hard.
power
A loud
of the
boom
attacks.
sounded.
The
The
barrier
power of a divine
shook
beast
violently.
was so shocking.
Shangwan Wan's
No
heart
wonder Chu
seemed to be
Lui
tightly
was
gripped
so
by
bold.
something.
With this
Half
red
paralyzed
tail
on the
phoenix,
ground,
she didn't even
looked
need
at the
to do
scarlet
anything
flame that
herself.
suddenly appeared.
The huge
with fear
figure
and
entrenched
anger.
itself
above.
She was afraid that it would
Shu
rush
Yue's
over
head,
in the next
carefully
moment.
protecting her
Fortunately,
under its wings.
the power of the
surrounding
was
flames
much stronger than she had
brightly
expected.
On
After an
Shu
intense
Yue's
battle,
face and body,
the crimson flame
Shang Wan
was
gritted her
intersected
teeth. It was
and
just that the
glared
color
at
of the barrier
Shu
seemed
Yue's
to have
expression
become lighter.
was indifferent.
However,
When she met
Shang Wan
Wan's
didn't notice this
resentful
at this
and
moment.
jealous gaze,
When she saw that the
she
scarlet
suddenly
flame
smiled.
was
Shang
unable to
Wan's
break
heart
through the barrier,
suddenly skipped a
and
beat.
finally
That
retreated.
smile, those eyes,
She finally
that
let out a long
expression,
breath.
it was very
It
similar
seemed
to
that
the power she had
wrapped in
devoured during this
flames
period
in
of
the
time
Imperial
was still
ancestral
useful.
hall that day.
But
Where did that
Shang
scarlet
Wan
flame come from?
unconsciously took
Shang
half
Wan
a step
supported
back,
her body
extremely
and
stood
shocked.
up with difficulty.
Who exactly
She
are
took
you?
a step forward
Mobile
and
users,
stared at the flame.
please browse
Such
for
a strong
better reading
and
experience
bright red
from Love
color.
Network. She seemed to have seen it before, and that flame was also floating quietly in the air.
Chapter
It didn't move forward
739.
or backward.
Everything was like
This made Shang Wan have the
It was like a
illusion
nightmare
that she was being
Shang
stared
Wan's
at.
body was
She felt
trembling
uncomfortable,
and her face
all
was
over.
pale.
She
Shu
clenched her
Lue
teeth
smiled
and wanted to
until
get
her
rid of that
eyes
flame.
turned into
But at this
crescents.
moment,
Me?
she had just
I'm
dodged
Chu
that
Lue.
attack with great
How can
difficulty.
third princess not
If she
recognize me?
rashly faced it
Her
head
tone
on,
was light.
She wasn't
as
sure
if she
what
was
would happen.
teasing her.
She wiped the
Shang
blood
Wan
from the
Wan
corner
took
of
a
her mouth.
deep breath.
There was some
and
blood
kept telling
stains on
herself
the
in her
pure
heart
gold sacred
that this
armor.
was Chu
This
Lue.
flame.
This was
flame.
Chu Lue.
That's right. But
Shang
the
Wan
firelight
Wan's
reflected
eyes
on her
suddenly
beautiful
lit up.
face,
Wasn't Chu
making it half
Lue's
bright
flame the
and
same
half
color?
dark.
Could
It
be
was
that
very
Chu
similar
Lue
to Shang
made a
Wan
move?
Yu. Shu
No,
Lue took a step
impossible.
forward and
Shang
seemed
Wan
a
Wan
little
frowned
worried.
again.
Third
Third
princess,
princess,
what's
here.
wrong? It was already
Don't
a
come
problem
over.
whether
Don't
he
come
could
over.
protect his own life.
Shang Wan
How could he
screamed.
give her such a blow?
At the same time,
she looked at the
she
ball of
hurriedly
flame
stepped
again,
back,
and her
and
gaze
accidentally
suddenly
fell to the ground.
froze. Shu Lue
Within the
stopped
flames,
and
there
stood
seemed to be a
there,
blurry
quietly
figure.
looking at Shang
She
Wan
stared at him
with a
carefully,
smile.
without
For a
blinking.
moment, she
Suddenly,
seemed to be high and
she
mighty.
sucked in a breath
Shang
of
Wan
cold
Wan
air.
looked at Chu
The thing
Lue.
inside seemed to
Her
be a
heart beating
nine-colored
wildly.
heavenly pheasant.
Shu Lue stood
No,
there.
it
and
looked a
looked
little
down at her,
different from the
as if she had
nine-colored
done it
heavenly
countless
pheasants.
times. And
Shang Wan Wan's
the pressure
face
was even
burned.
stronger.
It was too
Just as
embarrassing
Shang
for
Wan
her
Wan
to
was
be in
guessing.
such a
figure in the
sorry
flame
state.
suddenly
Chu Lue
raised
was
his
Chu
head.
Lue.
Then he opened
Who
his
else could she
eyes.
be?
No
A
one knew
brilliant
better than
rainbow,
her.
light
Shang Wan Yu was
flashed
dead.
past.
He was
Shang Wan
completely
Wan's heart
and
skipped a
utterly
beat.
dead.
She
There was no
reacted
chance of her
almost
coming back to
immediately
life.
and rushed
An illusion.
forward.
His
These were
origin
all
power
illusions.
transformed
Shang Wan Wan
into a
forced
sword
herself
and stabbed
to stand
out
up.
viciously.
The way she looked at Chu
However,
Lue
that ball of
gradually
scarlet
became
flames
fierce.
instantly exploded.
Even if Chu Lue
Bang.
didn't
In
discover
the blink of
all
an
this
eye,
today,
he disappeared
and didn't
without a
barge in.
trace.
She definitely wouldn't let
It
her
really
stay
was
for
her.
long.
Her face alone was
Chu
enough
Lue
to kill
opened
her
her
eyes,
10,000
and a cold,
times.
murderous
Yes,
intent
Chu Lue.
flashed across
You're Chu
her
Lue.
eyes.
Shang
Although it
Wan
was
Wan
only a
said
glance,
hatefully.
it was enough
No one
for
knew
her to
who she was
recognize
repeating it
that
to.
it was indeed
Chu Lue
Shang
looked at
Wan
her
Wan.
with interest.
She looked a little
Shang
different
Wan
from
Wan's
before.
reaction was
Although her
really
appearance
interesting.
and figure
Chu
were still
Lue
the same,
originally thought
the
that
expression
Shang
on her
Wan
face,
Wan was full of
there
hatred
seemed to be
for
something
her
wrong with
and would
it.
be very
In
happy
addition,
after
the
killing
black
her back
rune
then.
between her
But
brows
now,
looked
it wasn't that she
extremely
wasn't
strange
guilty
as well.
and
What made her feel the most
Chu
disgusted
Lue
was that
suddenly
Shang
curious.
Wan was actually
If Shang Wan
wearing
Wan
the
knew
pure
that she was
gold
really
armor.
Shang Wan Yu,
Chu Lue
what would her
pursed
expression
her lips
be?
tightly. No
And her
matter who you
face
are,
seemed to be
you
covered
deserve
with
to
a layer
die.
of frost.
Shang Wan Wan's
She had
heart
obtained
was
a
filled
pure
with
gold
anger
armor
and
by
fear.
accident back then.
Even though she kept
and had always
convincing
treasured
herself
it.
in her heart
She didn't
that this
expect
person
that
with
Shang
Chu
Wan Wan
Lue
would take it for
However,
her own.
countless
How is
scenes
it?
from the past
Did you find
appeared
out
in the
anything?
past. The
Mu
intense
Hongyu's
emotions
voice
caused her
pulled
facial
Chu Lue
features
back
to her
to
senses.
distort.
She
black
closed her eyes
aura
and
was
looked up.
faintly
Her
discernible
eyes were
between
clear
her
and
brows,
calm, and there
She
was a
nodded.
faint green
That seems to be
light
the
in
middle
her
of the
eyes.
swamp.
From afar,
There's a person there.
She looked
but
like
I
a
can't
malicious
see
spirit.
who it is.
Chu Lue
It's already
frowned
very
slightly.
impressive
Just now
to be able to
she
find
was a
out
little
this
puzzled.
much.
When did
Mu
Shang Wan
Hongyu
Wan's
sighed.
force turn
Chu
green?
Lue
She
smiled
didn't expect
that
that
there would
be
be
flames of the
Dumpling who was on her
same
shoulder.
color dancing in her
It's
eyes
all thanks
now.
to Dumpling.
It looked
She
very
had finally
strange.
persuaded Dumpling
Could it
to help
be
just now
that she had used
it was now a
special
mythical
method
beast
to devour
and had stayed
other
here for more
people's
than a year.
meridians? So it definitely
Shang
knew
Wan
more
Wan
about
attacked
everything
again.
here than they did. As expected, Dumpling
This
directly
time,
found Shang
she
Wan
used almost
Wan's
all of her
location.
strength.
As for
The
her,
berserk power
because she had a
carried
contract with
terrifying
Dumpling
pressure
and their
as it
minds were
came
connected.
crashing down.
She could easily
the space
see
around Chu Lui
everything that
was
dumpling had
instantly
found out.
compressed.
Shang
It was as if
Wan
a
was
mountain
very
was
vigilant.
pressing down
For
on her
safety,
body,
she didn't let
even
dumpling
the flow
stay
of the
for
force
too
in her
long
body
and
slowed
quickly
down.
retreated after taking
At this
a
moment,
glance.
Shang
She didn't
Wan's
leave any
strength
clues for
had
Shang
definitely
Wan.
reached
Recalling
rank
Shang
age.
Wan
Although
Wan's
Chu Lui
ferocious
had already
expression
broken
when she
through
suddenly
to rank
came
5,
back to her senses,
there was still a huge
Chu
gap
Lui
between her
sneered
and
in her
Shang
heart.
Wan. After doing
Dumpling
so
let
many
out a
dirty
clear
things in
cry.
secret, Screech.
Shang Wan was
A ball of
naturally more
red flames
guilty
instantly
than anyone
condensed
else
into a
and was
barrier,
more afraid
protecting
of being
Chu
discovered.
Luiyue.
Even if
in the
she was
middle.
the high
At the
and
same
mighty
time,
third
it
princess
flapped
of the
its
Tianling
wings
dynasty,
and several
she definitely
feathers
wouldn't be
flew
able to
out.
survive.
They were like
if this
sharp
matter
swords
was spread
that
out.
pierced
Using
towards
such a
Shang Wan.
despicable
Thud,
and
thud, thud.
insidious method,
The feathers that
to
emitted
devour
a
other
gorgeous
people's
glow
forces
and
carried
take
a
their lives,
powerful aura,
just to help herself
fiercely
recover her
hitting the
cultivation.
black barrier.
Once such a
front of
behavior was
Shang Wan
exposed,
the
what
black
awaited
barrier
Shang
trembled.
Wan was the
Shang
cursing
Wan
of
won
thousands
of
of
people.
It would
and
be
the
difficult to
punishment
devour
of never
Chu
being
Luiyue's
reincarnated
power in a short
Of
period
course,
of
she was
time.
afraid.
That crimson
At this
gold
moment,
pill phoenix by
Shang
her
Wan
side
was probably
seriously too
right?
powerful.
Thinking of this,
The most important
Chu
thing
Yue's
for her
mood
now
improved
was to
a lot.
recover her
She looked at
Yuan
Mu
meridian.
Qinghe.
She asked
Vice
in her
Admiral
heart,
Mu, how are the
"Soldiers,
seniors?
do you have a
Mu
way to deal
Qinghe
with that divine beast?"
just distributed
After
the
a
pills
moment,
to the
a
last
hoarse
batch
voice
of black cavalry.
lazily sounded.
Hearing this,
"I can help you
he
stall
raised his
that
head
red
and looked
gold
at Chu
phoenix
Luiyue
for
with
half
a
an hour.
complicated expression.
Whether you can kill Chu Luiyue,
4 of them can't
or
make
not
it,
will depend on your
and
ability.
21 of them
Thank
are
you,
seriously injured.
Shang Wan,
The
Wan
rest
was
are fine.
overjoyed.
As long as there
Chu
was no
Luiyue swept a
interference from
glance
that
at
divine
those people.
beast. The
Wouldn't it be a piece
situation
of
just
cake to
now
deal with
was
Chu
so
Luiyue?
dangerous. Not to
And the
mention half an
casualties were
hour.
already better
She could
than
take Chu
expected.
Yueyue's
This
life
was also
with a single
because
move.
most of the black
Then,
cavalry that
a
came
black
this time
rune
had
appeared
stayed
between
in the
Shang
Dawan
Wan's
Wan's
swamp
brows.
before.
Then,
If
if
it were
floated
ordinary
out,
soldiers,
a cold
the result
aura
would
spread out
definitely
from
be worse.
It quietly
Mu
passed
Qinghe
through the
paused
barrier
and
said,
drew an arc in the
"Thank
air.
you."
Chu
Chu
Luiyue
Luiyue
smiled
faintly
and suddenly
Didn't
felt a chill
Vice
in her
Admiral
heart.
Mu already
The force
thanked
that
me
forcefully
just now?
dragged her over
Being able to
just
save
now
them
is the
seemed
result
to be exactly
of
the
everyone's
same
efforts.
as the aura of
Vice
the
Admiral
room.
Mu
Could it
doesn't
be
have
that
to
this
thank
was
me
the
alone.
mysterious
Mu Qinghe
existence
pursed
that
his
was
lips
secretly
tightly.
helping Shang
Although Chu
Wan?
Luiyue said it
A
casually,
sense of
everyone
uneasiness
present suddenly
suddenly
welled up
just now
in her
clearly.
heart.
This
Chu
rune
Luiyue
was
was the one in
definitely more
charge of
difficult to
everything.
deal
If it weren't
with
for
than
her
Shang Wan
and the red gold
just
phoenix
as this
who
thought
cut off
flashed
the
through her
cold tree
mind,
roots,
Chu
and
Luiyue
burned
saw
more
that
than half
the
of
rune
it.
had already
The rest of them
flown
wouldn't be able to
towards
help
Dumpling.
even if they wanted
Several
to.
black lines
Her actions were
floated out
swift,
from the surface
and
of the
almost
sword.
everyone was
Those
shocked
lines
on
were
the
even
spot.
thinner than a
Only
strand of
then
hair.
did they understand
If one didn't look
that
carefully,
Chu Luiyue,
they wouldn't be able to
who had
detect it at
broken
all.
through to the
Tuan
fifth
Zi's
stage,
body burned
was
with
stronger
red
than they had
flames
imagined.
in an instant.
Chu Luiyue
Her
didn't
pair
claim
of
credit,
dazzling
but Mu
crystal-like
Qinghe couldn't
eyes
accept
were
this
also
kindness
shining
with a clear
brightly.
conscience.
However,
the black cavalry
when the
was
flames
very
touched
important
the
to
black
him,
lines,
and he was
they
indeed
actually didn't burn.
grateful to
The
be
black
able to save
lines
these
passed
people.
through the flames
As the deputy
quickly
general of the
outlined
black
a
cavalry,
huge
this
net.
gratitude
Dumpling
is necessary.
Chu Luiyue's
Chu
heart
Luiyue
tightened
tucked her hair behind
and
her
immediately
ear and
wanted
smiled.
Dumpling to
Vice Admiral
retreat.
Mu,
You're
however,
welcome.
it was
This
already
is what I
too
should
late.
do. That
She
huge
naturally
net
had to save her
directly
people.
trap Dumpling.
Let's go to the center of the swamp as soon as possible.
At the same time,
and
Shang
capture the
Wan
mastermind
rushed over.
behind the scenes.
She threw a simple
Mobile
and direct
users,
punch.
Please browse
Die.
and read.
Mobile users,
a better reading
please
experience
browse
comes
for a
from
better
Love
reading
Network.
experience from Love Network. Chapter 730. Chu Yueyue's suggestion received
Chapter
everyone's
740.
approval.
Just
Now,
as Chu
they
Luiyue
basically
and
knew
Shang Wan
that
were
someone
in intense
purposely
battle.
caused such
The
a
people left
huge
behind
commotion
were
in the
also
Mystic
very
Forest.
anxious.
Those tree
Yang
branches
Qing,
that crazily
sudden
devoured the
self-destruction
cultivator's
caught
strength
everyone
were
off guard.
obviously being
By the time they
controlled by
reacted,
someone.
Chu
They could only
Yueyue's
leave
figure
after
had
they
already
dealt with the
disappeared.
mastermind.
The only
Chu
thing left on the
Yueyue's
battlefield
gaze
was
swept
the
across
violent
the black
aftermath
cavalry
of the
soldiers.
explosions.
Lei
Actually,
Laosi stared at
she
the
still had
empty
an impression
space.
of some of them.
Feeling
However,
angry and regretful,
things were still the same
as
now,
his chest heaved
but the
up
people
and
had
down.
changed.
Her
She
Highness
looked
was
at
right in
Qing,
front of me.
Big brother
Yet
Qing,
I actually couldn't
these 20
protect her
people.
well.
Do you have a way
She
to
could
take
only
care of
watch
them?
helplessly
Other than the
as
few
she was
that can't be
dragged into
saved,
the void.
the remaining
2 years
21
ago,
people
we weren't
aren't
by
in
Her
good
Highness's
condition
side.
The best
which gave those
solution
people
is
a
to let them
chance.
stay
But
and
now,
rest properly.
the blood and
If
Lei
I forced them
Laosi's
to follow
body
the main
surged
group
as he
forward,
raised his hand.
I'm afraid. Wanting to
Qin
slap
he stared at
himself.
her intently,
Laosi,
as if in
Qin
deep
Yi,
thought.
who was standing
It seems like Her
beside him,
Highness still wants
suddenly
to help.
spoke. He
Lei
paused for a
Laosi's
moment
raised
and
hand
said,
instantly
I can help
stopped in
them set up a
midair.
barrier
He looked
and let
up
them stay
and saw
here
his big
peacefully.
brother looking at
As
him
long as the
with a
extremely
calm expression
dangerous
and a hint
situation
of
from
warning in his
before
eyes.
doesn't happen again,
If we overreact
there shouldn't
now,
be a problem.
problem will definitely be suspected by others. Thank you, Big Brother Mu-Ching-ha. Qin-Yi's lips curved up slightly, watching from behind. As he lowered his eyes. Qin-Yi's silent warning made a tinge of helplessness and indulgence. He clenched his teeth and put his hand back, but his fists were tightly clenched. Her Highness has already changed, and the veins on his forehead were faint. And her appearance and figure, what happened just now, completely different. Jiang Yuqing hurriedly walked over with a cold, her personality stern expression. Doesn't seem to have changed. He turned around with a calm expression. He raised his hand and waved it lightly. Her self-destructed colored barrier was formed in an instant. The mastermind also forcefully dragged her away. The barrier emitted a faint glow, his brows dense with boundless This means that there's indeed something wrong with Yang Qin. One of the black cavalry soldiers reacted is the mastermind cupped his fists and said he shook his head to Qin and looked at Song Qing. Thank you, young Master Qin. Instantly looked like he was scalded. Instantly reminded the others. What do you
All
mean
the
by
soldiers
that gaze?
thanked him gratefully.
Yang Qin,
He chuckled.
is from the purple
You don't have
Shao
to thank
sword
me.
sect.
If you want to
And
thank
she's
someone,
very close
thank
to
Lu
you.
Yu. Young
If she
Master
didn't
Song.
save all of you
Now,
first,
that something
we
happened
wouldn't be
to
able
her.
to talk about anything
Don't you
else.
have anything to say?
Besides, if she didn't
Qing's
say
tone was
anything,
very calm.
I wouldn't have bothered
But
to get
every
involved
single
in this
word
mess.
was extremely
Who asked
sharp.
them to be soldiers
It directly
led by
raised
Mu-Qing-Ha.
Song.
Qing knew that what happened
to the
back then
highest
actually
level.
had nothing
The
to do with
surrounding
these
people
soldiers.
all looked
so he really
over
couldn't blame them.
suspiciously.
But when he
That's
saw
right.
Mu-Qing-Ha
Everyone
here,
had clearly seen
he
how
felt very
Song Qingyan
unhappy
had protected
and
Yang
even
Qin
felt annoyed looking at
with
these
all his
people.
might. Just
all
now.
the officers and
Did he
soldiers
not know that there was
turned
something
their
wrong
heads
with Yang
to
Qin?
thank Chu Lu.
Song Qingyan
Thank
said
you, Miss Chu.
angrily. Even
What
though
can I
most
say?
of them were injured,
I don't know anything.
their thanks were still
Initially,
filled
he
with
wanted to
energy
defend
and
Yang
sincerity.
They had all
But in this
experienced
situation,
countless
any
life
words would
and
be
death
useless.
situations.
Yang
So they
Qin
naturally
or had
knew
chosen
how
to
precious life
self-destruct.
was.
If this wasn't a
Chu
guilty
Lu had
conscience,
saved
then what
so many
was?
of their lives.
Coupled with her
How could they not thank
strange
him?
wound from before. A black
Even
cavalry
Song
soldier
Qingyan
was
standing
well
at the
aware
front
that
suddenly
she must be
lowered his
hiding
voice
something
and
said,
the person was
"That's right.
already dead.
Miss Chu,
And the most
my name is
important thing
Tian
now
Zhuang
was to clear
If you
himself
need
of
anything in the
suspicion.
future, just let me know.
You were so
I,
close
Tian
to her.
Zhuang.
Do you really
will
not know
definitely
anything
not
about
shirk
what she
my
said
duty.
or did?
He didn't say which squad he belonged to in
Qin,
the Black
he asked.
Cavalry.
Song
He only said his
Qingyan
name.
felt extremely
This meant that
aggrieved.
he was expressing
I
his
really don't
gratitude
know.
personally.
Even if I ask you 100
Chu
times,
Liyue's
you still
eyes
don't
curved.
know.
How
Me
long had
too.
Yang Qin
Miss Chu, I'm so
been the
Kaiyan.
purple Shao
We
sword
owe you
sect?
our lives.
He was also
So we'll
attracted
do
to her
whatever you
because
say
she
in the
was
future.
beautiful and
As though
gentle,
Kaiyan spoke,
which was why he got
secretly
close to
glanced
her.
at
Who would
Mu-Qing-Ha
have thought
and
that
scratched his
something like
head
this
at
would
Chu
happen?
Liyue in embarrassment.
Qingyan,
Of course,
I believe that
that's
this
when we're
matter
not
has
wearing the
nothing
black
to do
cavalry
with you.
armor.
But any
He,
clues are very
when they wore
important
the
now.
armor.
If
They
there
didn't
didn't
have a
anything wrong
name
with her,
and only
feel
had
free
the
to tell
title
me if you
Black
know
Cavalry.
anything. The person
Obeying
who said
military
this was
orders
Jiang
was a
Yuqing.
soldier's duty.
Song Qingyan
The Black
looked at him
Cavalry
in disbelief,
especially the ones
this
led by
means
Mu-Qing-Ha,
Jiang Yuqing
had
is
always been
clearly
strict with
suspicious of
military
me.
orders.
Just
and
as he was about to
followed them
refute
to the letter,
he saw
but when they
Jiang
took off their
Yuqing's
armor,
serious
they were
expression,
themselves,
as if he was
those who
very
could fight their
concerned
way
about
out
this
of
matter.
Dahuang Swamp.
No,
were
he was
all
clearly concerned about
iron-blooded
Chu
good men.
Liyue. How could they not
Song
repay
Qingyan
a favor?
had some understanding of
Jiang
Jiang
Yuqing.
Me
Seeing
too.
his reaction,
And Xinji,
he could basically guess
and
what he was thinking.
voices
and could not
rang
help
out one
but be
after
secretly
another.
shocked.
The deep and
Mu-Qing-Ha,
powerful
who was at the
voices
side,
reverberated,
glanced at
as if they
Jiang
wanted to
Yuqing
tear
without
apart
batting an
this
eyelid.
dark and
Jiang
cramped
Yuqing
space.
looked
Chu
gentle and
Liyue
polite,
felt
but he was
something
actually
surging in her
cold-hearted
chest.
and ruthless.
She knew. The
She
person
always
he
knew.
valued the most
These
was
people.
himself.
She
Shang
took a
Wan
deep
wanted been
breath
missing for
and
so
suppressed
long,
the
but
surging
he had never
emotions
been
in her
so
heart.
anxious.
Understand
Chu
everyone's
Liyue
intentions.
just disappeared.
This is actually
Yet he
a small
already
matter,
couldn't hold it in,
so you don't have to worry too much
Mu-Qing-Ha
about it.
looked down.
Those who
and
need to
suppressed the
recuperate
gas in her heart.
stay behind.
I'm afraid that
the rest
Jiang
will go
Yuqing
together.
himself,
When this is
hasn't
over,
noticed this,
we'll look for
right?
you again and
I
return
really don't
together.
know anything.
Chu
If I
Liyue
knew,
pacified the
why would I
soldiers with
waste
a
so
few
much
words.
effort to
Those
save
who
her
should stay
just
all
now?
consciously
Why would I
stood
speak
on
up
the
for
other
her?
side.
Song
As for the
Qingyan
large group who
defended
were about to
himself.
leave, nothing could
After
be
hearing
seen
from
from
Jiang
Jiang
Yuqing's
Yuqing's
expression.
They all
But his
stood
eyes
together
were
with
deep
high
and
morale.
obscure.
Mu-Qing-Ha
It
looked
seems
at
like
the
I really
scene
can't
and was
get
secretly
anything out of
shocked.
Song Qingyan.
Chu Liyue
He looked at
and
Qin
these soldiers
Yi
had
again.
only just met.
Young Master
But she
Qin.
could already
Do you have a way to
easily
find
make
her
them
current
obey
location?
her. The moment
She
he
seemed to
said
have
that,
some kind of
he heard
inexplicable
footsteps
aura that could
behind
make
him.
people
I know where she
unconsciously
is.
listen to her.
The cold and
do as she
indifferent
said.
voice of a youth
Honorable,
sounded.
dignified,
The surroundings
but
fell
also
silent.
full of affinity.
He looked at the
Without batting
golden-haired
an eyelid,
youth standing
she
in front of him.
controlled the entire
His expression
scene.
was cold.
She was like a natural
and his lips
superior.
were slightly
Even if she was
pursed.
only a teenage
Only his
girl
eyes were
and
filled
came from an
with
ordinary
determination.
background.
She did not
narrowed
feel
his
the
eyes.
slightest bit out of
Chang
place when
Wanzhou
commanding
continued.
so many people.
I'll bring you to save
It was
her.
as if
Qin,
was supposed
he gave
to
a
be
half
like
smile.
this.
Why me?
Mu-Qing-Ha had
Because
fought her
you're
way
the
up from the bottom.
strongest.
So
You can
she
help
knew
her.
the temperament of these
Chang
soldiers
Wanzhou
best.
stared at him
They had
fixedly.
seen
He didn't
countless
say the
life
remaining
and
half of
death
the
situations. It's also
Her
because
flesh, blood,
Chu
tendons,
Liyue
and
trust
bones were
Qin
almost all
Yi.
tempered.
He could clearly see that
surface,
Chu
they
Liyue
looked
trusted
well-behaved,
Qin,
but in
and lay
fact
lousy
they
a
were
lot.
very stubborn.
Even though he didn't know why, he trusted her.
Other than their
Qin,
generals,
he paused
they would
and
almost
nodded.
never listen to anyone
Jiang
else's
Yuqing
orders.
immediately
Even Shang
asked
Wan,
why.
Wan could not
Then where
exactly
exactly is
control
she?
the black
The
cavalry.
moment he asked that,
This was also another
Jiang
important
Yuqing
reason
realized that he
why
was
she
too
insisted on
anxious.
bringing him this time.
His expression
Only with
changed,
Mu Qinghe,
and he added,
with these people
if we go together,
unconditionally
we'll go
obey
together.
Shang
The
Wan
chances of
Wan's
success
requests.
will be higher.
But Chu Luiyue, probably it was still because
Mu
she
Hongyu
saved him today.
and Yi Ranran
Mu
had
Qinghe
already
thought
followed
silently
them
in her
and seemed to
heart.
want to go together.
Looking at Chu
Chang
Yue's
Wan's
pure
pure
glance at
appearance,
Jiang Yuqing,
she felt that she
and
was
slowly
overthinking.
swept his
These
gaze
soldiers
across the crowd.
also understood that
She's
even
very
if they
far
wanted
from
to
here.
repay,
If too many
Chu
people go,
Luiyue,
it will
they
only
definitely
drag down
could
the speed.
not use the
Jiang
name of the
Yuqing's
Black
face
Cavalry.
was a little ugly.
Otherwise,
Mu
who would the Black
Hongyu
Cavalry
and
belong
Yi
to?
Ranran
Perhaps she was really
originally wanted to go,
overthinking,
but
but
they
they
hesitated
hesitated
when
when
they
they
heard
these
that.
thoughts.
Then you guys go
moved forward
first
with everyone.
It's more important
After the
to
red
save
flame
Lu Yu
disappeared,
first. Shang Wan fell into
Even though Mu
fear
Hongyu was
and
also
worry.
very worried.
Who was watching her?
She still
Who
said
saw
that.
her?
She
Who
had
knew
a
what she was
faint
doing?
yuan body.
Previously,
Could teleport.
she thought that
So
she would not be
it was actually
noticed
more
by
convenient
anyone
for
if
her
she stayed
compared to
here.
the others.
But now she
However,
knew that she was
wasn't sure
ridiculously
if her
wrong.
current skills were
She
enough.
anxiously paced
It wouldn't be
back
good
and
if she
forth.
became everyone's
With such a
burden
potentially
when she went
dangerous
there.
existence.
Yi Ran
She
also
really
nodded
could not
seriously.
feel at ease.
Big Brother
No,
Qin,
no.
you guys go
Now,
first. I should
Since
recover
they
my
already
yuan
said that,
meridian first.
the others couldn't say
Just now,
anything else.
she had prepared for a
Qin,
long time.
He raised his hand,
was about to
and
attack
gently
the
waved
black
it,
cavalry,
tearing
but she
open
did not
space.
expect to be stopped.
Then he stepped
Now,
in.
Chong Wancho followed
followed
closely
Her gaze
behind.
turned sharp.
Lei Laosi
and
was
she
about to
attacked
follow
in another
when
direction.
Qin glanced
Mobile
at him
users
and
please
lightly
browse
shook
for
his
a
head.
better reading experience
Protect them
from
well.
Love Network.
After that, the two of them completely disappeared.
Chapter
Jiang
731
knitted his brows
Actually, there's
tightly
still quite a number
and
of people
fell
left
into
who could
deep
do
thought.
it. If
For
Chu
example,
Luiyue was
the
really
disciple
taken
from
away
those
by
sects were
Shang
almost
Wan
all
Wan
extremely
just now,
outstanding
I actually know the
geniuses.
location.
Needless to say,
digression.
the Daijing
Continue
Yuan
at 6
Meridian
p.m.
was
middle
mobile
grade
users
or even
please
high grade.
browse and read.
Shang Wan Wan
A better
checked
reading
around
experience
and
quickly
comes from
chose
Love
someone.
Network.
The Yuan Meridian in her body had already recovered by more than half. She only needed a few more times
Chapter
to
741.
This made
Jiang
Shang Wan
was
feel
very
much more
conflicted,
conflicted, as if
long
there
as
were
she
two
could
of him
complete this
arguing
task
in his mind.
Nothing else
On one
mattered.
hand, she licked
If
her
Shang
lips,
Wan
and
really
the
did
dark
all
green
this,
light
she
in her
definitely
eyes
wouldn't
flashed
leave
again.
Chu Luiyue
However,
alive.
she didn't know
Even if
herself.
Qin, Yi,
Just as
and
she
the
held her
rest
breath
went over
and was about to
they
make
might
a
not
move,
be able to save
a
Chu
strange
Luiyue.
sound suddenly
On the other
came
hand,
from behind her.
Chu Luiyue
Her
probably
heart
already
skipped
knew
a beat.
something.
If she made out of here
immediately
alive,
looked back
she would
vigilantly.
undoubtedly be
At the same time,
a huge
she
hidden
weighed her
danger to
force.
Shang Wan Wan.
At this moment,
she might even
her
implicate
force
me.
had already
After all,
turned into a
I'm in the
light
same
green
boat
color.
as Shang Wan Wan.
It
If
transformed
Chu
into a
Luiyue
sharp blade
exposed
when
what
Shang
Shang
Wan
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 did,
and quickly
our
swept
marriage
over
would
her.
definitely be
Cracked.
ruined.
The sound of
Shang Wan
something
Wan,
shattering
together
was
with
heard.
him,
She
would
focused
suffer
her
a
eyes,
disastrous
and
fall
only
in
then did she
status.
see that when the
There were
black
already
swamp
many
surged,
people in Shilling
a
City
ghastly
who
white
hated him.
skeletal hand
Once he
had
lost his
floated
power,
out.
it
It
went
went without
just now had
saying what
directly
awaited
cut off
him.
the hand bone.
After thinking
The
for a
mud
long
churned
time,
and quickly
Jiang
swallowed
Yuqing's
the
gaze
bone
gradually
and
turned
disappeared.
cold.
Phew. At
This
this point,
point,
patted her
Chu
chest
Luiyue and Shang
and
Wan
let out a
Wan
breath
didn't
with
know
lingering
what was
fear.
happening in another
She
place.
thought that thing had
Shang
come
Wan
to spy
Wan
on her
threw a
again.
punch.
She turned
This
around,
punch was
intending
extremely
to
simple and
concentrate
clean.
and do it
There
again.
weren't any fancy
a bright
moves,
scarlet flame
and only an
suddenly
extremely
appeared in front of her
domineering
eyes.
force.
A ghostly green
Shang Wan Wan
fist
screamed
shadow
and
flew
immediately
out,
retreated,
silently
at the
tearing
same time
through space.
she set up the barrier.
It drew
again.
a perfect arc
However,
in midair.
this time,
Finally,
the red
it went
flame
straight
didn't
for
come
Chu
forward again.
Luiyue's face.
It just floated there
The
quietly.
space in front of Chu
However,
Luiyue was
this made
harshly
Shang Wan Wan
squeezed
even more
under this
flustered.
valiant
As
suppression.
expected, Chu
As expected,
Luiyue felt
someone was
as if
spying on
something
her in the
heavy
dark.
was pressing
She was
down on
flustered
every
and
part of her
furious.
body.
She
And it was
immediately went
extremely
forward
painful
to get rid of that thing.
unbearable.
However,
Her entire
a rainbow-colored
body
light
seemed to have been
flashed,
frozen,
and the
and
flame
even moving
disappeared
became
again.
extremely
It took another
difficult.
look.
Shang
Stage
Wan Wan
8
was
warriors
so
all
angry
out
that her
attack.
liver hurt.
Even Chu
Her chest
Luiyue wouldn't be
and
able to
abdomen
face it
were
head-on.
suffocated.
Chu Luiyue's
as if they would
eyes
explode
flashed
in the
with
next
coldness
moment
as she
the
watched
other
the
party was
rapidly approaching
extremely
fist
cunning.
shadows,
Appearing so
suddenly,
the water
and
droplet
disappearing
in her
so quickly
dantian
that Shang Wan
suddenly started
had no
spinning.
time to react.
Boundless energy
let alone
surged
do
out,
anything.
and
Shang Wan Wan was
instantly
still
filled
angry
her
for a while.
limbs and bones.
She gritted her teeth
with the
and
support
decided
of
to
this
solve the
power,
problem.
The pressure
of her
on
Yuan
Chu
Meridian
Luiyue was
first.
greatly reduced.
However, her
With a
state
slight
of mind had
movement
been
of her feet,
completely disrupted
she
by that
disappeared
ball
from
of
spot.
flame.
The
Devouring
shadow
energy
to
to reconstruct the
Shang
Yuan
Wan Wan
Meridian
narrowed
was
her
an extremely
eyes and
exhausting
sneered.
task.
You do have some
Right now,
skills.
Shang Wan
Chu
Wan's
Yue's
heart was a
aura
mess,
was clearly
and her
much
mind
stronger
was a
than
mess.
before.
She
From the
couldn't
looks
do
of it,
anything at all.
She indeed
She
had
was
a trump
so
card
angry
that
that
could
she
not
paced
be
back and
underestimated.
forth on the platform.
Otherwise,
the boots
he wouldn't
of
have
the
been able
pure
to
gold
dodge her
armor
full
made a
force
sound
attack
on the ground
so easily.
Tap.
No
Tap.
wonder Chu
Tap.
Luiyue
It was
able
cold
to
and
obtain
crisp,
its first place,
but it also
in previous
carried a trace of
competitions.
heavy pressure.
Shang Wan Wan's
Patter.
heart was filled with disdain.
Something seemed to have
You want to
sunk
rely on this
Shang
little
Wan
bit of
Wan looked
strength
down to escape
her eyebrows.
I'm
furrowed
afraid you're
tightly.
too naive.
The bloodstains
no matter
on the
how many
pure
tricks
gold
he had,
armor were
They were all
slowly
jokes in the face
condensing
of
into
absolute
blood droplets
power.
before
An idea
dripping
popped up
onto
in
the
Shang
ground.
Wan's
That sound just now
and the
was
fish
the
shadow
sound of blood
suddenly
dripping
changed its
down
direction
from the arm
and
that had
continued
accidentally
charging
rubbed
toward
against
Chu Luiyue.
Shang Wan's
However,
heart skipped
at this moment,
She then
a
looked at her
silver
chest
ray of light
and
flew
realized that
out
the
from
situation
Chu
was the
Luiyue's
same
hand.
here.
Shang
These were
Wan
all
narrowed
intentionally
her
or
eyes
unintentionally
and took a
done
closer
by
look.
her. At first, she didn't pay much attention to
Only
it,
then
but
did
now,
she realize
why does it
that it was
seem
the
like
dagger
something
that
is
Chu
wrong?
Luiyue
After the
had
bloodstains
used before.
dripped down,
She raised the corner
the
of her
pure
mouth
gold armor
in a
was
mocking
still
smile.
clean and neat.
You want to rely on this
It didn't
thing
look like
to
it had been
break
stained
this
with
consort's
blood
attack.
before.
What a
Could
joke.
it be that this pure
As the
gold
saying
armor
goes,
is originally
an inch
like
longer
this?
is an inch
Shang
stronger.
Wan muttered
A handy
in a low
yuan
voice.
instrument
She
could
had
often
often
seen
increase the
Shang Wan
cultivator's
wear
combat
this pure
power.
gold armor
However,
before.
It was her first time
wearing
it,
always
so she didn't know much about it.
No matter how sharp
many
and
traces
useful
of
this
battle
dagger
was,
it was
but there
still
were no
easily
bloodstains.
inferior to swords.
Perhaps it was really because this pure
swords,
gold armor
and halberds
wasn't stained with
Therefore,
blood.
from Shangwan
Shangwan
Wan's point of
Wan
view,
thought to herself,
Chu Yue's
when
insistence
she thought that
on using
someone
this
was
dagger
secretly
was
watching
just
her,
asking for trouble.
she became frustrated
However,
again.
in the next
The other
second,
party was
her
watching her
complacent
so
and
closely.
disdainful smile
Could it be that
froze
they
on
had
her face.
discovered something?
This was because
And every
Chu
time she
Yue's
wanted to
dagger
try
had
again,
harshly
that
split her
fireball
fist shadow
would
in half.
suddenly appear.
It was extremely
This made
fast.
Shangwan Wan
The fist
uneasy.
shadow's power
She
did
couldn't
not
concentrate
seem to be
on
of
repairing
any
her
use,
Yuan
as it was
meridian.
torn apart
After a long
just
time,
like that. She
the
still didn't
condensed
find
power
anything.
instantly
Just as Shangwan Wan was at her
Chu
wit's
Liyue
end,
had already
the black
retreated
rune in
and
between
set
her
up a
brows
barrier in front of
suddenly
him,
floated
blocking
down
the violent
and swayed
energy
in front of her
outside.
eyes.
Shangwan
was
Wan's
both shocked
shrank
and furious.
A trace of
The dagger in
deep fear
Chu Liyue's
flashed
hand.
across the
There was
depths
clearly
of her
something
eyes.
wrong with it.
A hoarse voice
Perhaps
suddenly
it's also a
sounded
rare
from the room.
treasure.
Are you so
No wonder
useless?
she never let it go.
That voice
If
was
it were
low and
any other
hoarse.
time, it was
Shangwan
hard to tell
Wan
if it
might
was
have
a
some
man
interest
or a
in that
woman.
dagger.
But it instantly
However,
made
at this
Shangwan
moment,
Wan's
her heart
face
was
filled
turned
with
pale.
thoughts of killing
Who are
Chu
you?
Liyue.
A low
as soon
laugh
as
came
possible.
from the rune.
Since her first
Containing
attack had
undisguised
failed,
mockery.
she quickly made
Don't you know
another
who
move.
you relied on
This
to be where
time,
you are today?
she was much more
Why?
serious.
You don't want to admit
Her
it now.
figure flashed.
After her
and
guess
she
was
rushed in
confirmed.
front of Chu
Shangwan
Liyue.
Wan's face
Although Chu
instantly
Liyue was
turned
fast,
even uglier.
he was not as fast
All
as
along,
Shangwan Wan.
she
was
knew
moving
that
at
there was a
full speed.
mysterious existence
Moreover,
in her body.
Under such
She
circumstances,
had heard this voice before.
She did not
but only
intend
twice.
to continue hiding.
The first time was
Shangwan
many
Wan's
years
hands
ago.
formed a
It
seal
was also that
in
time
front of her
that made her
the
want to
dark
kill
green
Shangwan
force
Wan.
surged
She
out
had made up
one
her mind
after
to
another
snatch
and formed a
everything
palm
from her.
print in front
The other
of
time
Shangwan
was the
Wan.
night Shangwan
This
Wan
palm
died.
print was
At
about
that
the size
time,
of her hand.
her Yuan meridian
and
had been
sparkling
completely
glow.
destroyed by
The
Shangwan
surrounding
Wan.
power
It
began
was this
to
voice
gather
that had appeared
towards this
and
palm
told her
print.
how to
Chu
restore her
Liyue
Yuan
narrowed
meridian.
his eyes.
It was not that
She was too
Shangwan
familiar
Wan
with
was
this
not
move,
afraid.
that
But she
Shangwan
also
Wan
yearned
used.
for Jiang
This was
Yiqing.
because this was
She
a
wanted to
palm
obtain
technique
power
that
and
only the
authority.
disciples
She
of the
wanted to
Tianling
obtain
dynasty's
everything
royal
that
family
Shangwan Yu once
could
had.
cultivate. Therefore,
Ling Xiaopao.
she had always obeyed.
Most
this voice.
importantly,
although this was an earth rank,
she didn't
martial
expect
skill,
that it would
the power
appear
that it could
in such a
unleash
form
was
today.
enough to reach
Countless
the
guesses
heaven rank.
flashed through
Shangwan Wan's hands
mind
paused
as she looked at the
and then she
strange
changed her
black
posture
room.
slightly.
She tried her best
The
to calm
surrounding
herself
energy
down,
began
but
to
her
surge
body was
towards the
trembling
palm print,
violently,
even more violently.
So it's really
Chu
you.
Liyue,
Please
sneered
forgive me
in his heart
for not
The
noticing
Ling
it
Xiao
just now.
palm was
Slap.
divided into
It was
three
as if an
levels.
invisible hand
The first
had
level was
slapped
something that
Shangwan
all the
Wan hard
disciples
on
of
the
the royal
face.
family could
The
cultivate.
crisp sound of a
But the
slap
second level
instantly
required
rang
the
out.
cultivator's strength
Shangwan
to
Wan
reach
fell
the
hard
seventh
to the
rank
ground
before they
Her
were
helmet was
qualified
also thrown
to
off.
continue cultivating.
Half of her
This
face
requirement
instantly
might be a little
became
high
red
for
and
ordinary
swollen.
people. Blood flowed out from the corner of her mouth. You're
But for the
getting bolder
disciples
by
of
the
the
day
Tianling
to play
royal
tricks
family.
in front of
It was
me.
not difficult.
The voice in the room
However,
was cold and
not everyone
sinister.
was able to
Shangwan
successfully
Wan
cultivate
struggled
the
to
second
stand up.
level. I didn't
Because
slap.
the Ling Xiao palm
This time,
was
it
obscure
was the other
and
half of her
difficult
face
to
that
understand.
was slapped.
Many people were
Digression,
unable to enter
6
the second level.
a.m.
As for
Mobile
the third
users,
level, it could
please
only be
browse for a
continued
better reading
after reaching the
experience
eighth
from Love
rank.
Network.
Although the current Shangwan Wan had barely reached the 8th
Chapter
rank,
732.
her Yuan meridian was
Shangwan
damaged,
Wan fell
and it was
heavily
impossible
to the
for
ground
her
again
to continue
Her
studying.
hairpin was knocked to
Therefore,
the ground.
She
and
only
her hair
displayed
was
the
scattered
strength of the
messily.
second level.
This time,
However,
she was hit
in her
until
opinion,
she saw stars.
this was enough
and
to
her
deal
vision
with Chu
turned
Liyue.
black.
She
She
opened
opened
her
her
mouth,
mouth,
use the
and
second
her
level
lips and
of the
teeth
Ling
were
Xiao
filled
palm.
with a strong
You can be
smell of
considered
blood.
to have
All she
died
spat out was
a
blood.
worthy death.
Her entire face
Chu
was
Liyue's
numb
expression
and
was cold.
After a
And
short
a mocking
pause,
smile,
the intense
flashed
pain
across the corner
surged
of her
up
mouth.
like a tide.
Speaking
But
of
this
which,
was not as
Shangwan
strong
Wan
as the
could
deep
not learn the
fear
second level
that
no
suddenly
matter how
erupted
hard
in
she
her
tried.
heart.
She
had to
knew that
secretly
this
beg her
mysterious
and learn
person
from
was
her.
very strong.
At that time,
but she didn't know
Shangwan
that
Wan
he was
finally
so
succeeded in
terrifying.
cultivating
She had been
it after
easily
patient
dealt
guidance.
with. One
She
had
was
to know
overjoyed
that her current
and tactfully
strength
said
was
that she
almost at
hoped
the
to give
early
her father
stage of
surprise.
Stage 8 warrior.
How could Shangwan
But when
Yu
the other
not know
party
what she
attacked,
meant back then?
she didn't even have
However,
time to react.
she did not mind
She could only be
and took
beaten.
the initiative
These
to
two
few slaps completely made Shangwan unaware of the gap between her. She would only say that Shangwan had comprehended. Are you willing to tell the truth? After the news spread, voice sounded many people praised Shangwan like a demon's voice echoing in her Even ears. Her father's attitude Shangwan Wan's heart trembled violently. Was much gentler. She curled up. Said that he could not with her head when she was young. This junior, she had become smarter. This junior knows her mistake. Chu Yue's hand, she didn't dare to play slightly in her sleeve. She could only since she was the one who taught her back and admit her mistake. It was time for her to return. Please give this junior another chance. Please browse if you have any reading experience. This junior will go through water and tread on fire without hesitation. In the past 2 years, Shangwan Wan had never knelt to 742, let alone Chu Luiyue held his breath and concentrated. Father was in a force in his body, and she was the ruler of the Tianlin poured his right hand. She was
second
Starlight,
only
suddenly
to one
lit up
person
on his
and
fingertip.
above all.
Soon,
So kneeling
the
at this
Starlight
time
made her
separated
feel
and
quite
quite
ashamed
ashamed
finger
in her heart.
beside him.
But she didn't dare
In the
not
blink of
kneel.
an eye,
Her little
all
life
three fingers
was
on
in
the
the
other
other
party's
party's
right hand had
If you had
lit up.
done this earlier,
But did not stop.
wouldn't there have been so
The
much
fourth
trouble?
Starlight
The black
appeared
rune
shakily.
swayed,
Although it looked a
gently
little
and
weaker than
snared.
the previous
Shangwan
three,
didn't
still
dare to
appeared.
move.
The surrounding
Yuan
energy
meridian has
surged
long been
as if it wanted
damaged
to
by the
rush over.
Tianjing Yuan meridian.
However,
logically
Chu Liyue
speaking,
waved his other
it can't be
hand
repaired.
gently and
It was me who
repelled
gave you a
all
chance
the
to
dirty
live.
energy.
Now,
Shangwan
the
might not
opportunity
mind.
is in front of
She
you.
might even be
but
happy
you're so
to devour the
useless.
surrounding energy.
You are indeed mud
She cannot
that can't support
dislike.
a wall.
That
That
person's
person's
tone
tone
was slow.
Therefore,
But there was
Chu
an air of
Liyue
superiority.
simply continued
Every
to
word
mobilize
was
the
very
energy in his body.
straightforward. The water
Not leaving
droplets
any
spun
face
quickly
for Shangwan.
The five patterns
Shangwan Wan's
fluctuated,
face turned
and the
red and
majestic
white.
force,
But she didn't dare to
continuously
refuse.
surged
Senior,
toward
please guide
Chu
me.
Liyue.
Shangwan was
Sensing
not
that Chu
stupid.
Liyue had
She knew that the
isolated
other
the
party
surrounding
must have
energy,
come for her
but his
Yuan
aura
meridian.
was still
Sure
rising
enough,
rapidly.
the man continued.
Shangwan Wan's expression
Your position
changed
has
slightly.
already been discovered.
How'd he do it?
There's no
Could it be
point
that
in running.
Chu Liyue
You might
had
as well
other
make
trump
use of the
cards?
time.
This
to heal
momentary
your Yuan
distraction
meridian.
caused
After
the
you find a
energy
target,
that Shangwan
I will
Wan
help
was
you set up a
gathering
barrier
to become
so that
chaotic
no one will
for a
disturb
moment.
you. As
She
long as
quickly
we stay
focused
calm,
and
everything else
stabilized
is
it
not a
with
problem.
great difficulty.
Shangwan Wan was a little
Seeing that
hesitant.
the green palm print had finally returned to normal.
But
Senior,
Shangwan Wan closed
there must
her
be
eyes.
someone who knows what
She
I'm
felt
doing
somewhat
now.
sullen.
If the
It
news
was
is true
shreds.
that she had learned the
So what if
second
I
level,
know?
but a
As
large
long as you
part of
don't
it was
bump
actually
into
the
them on
copy from
spot,
Shangwan yet.
no one could do anything
because she did not
for you.
fully comprehend.
Don't forget
it.
who you are.
She had to follow.
She woke
every
Shangwan Wan
step
up
that
with a start.
Shangwan you had taught
Her
her
heart
when she
shook
used this move.
as she
If there were
suddenly
any
understood
mistakes in the
what was going on.
process,
That's right.
all her efforts
She was the
would be for
third
naught.
princess of the
On one
Tianling
hand,
dynasty.
Shangwan Wan was
as
proud
long as no one
that
saw
she
her
could
with their own
cultivate
eyes.
to the second
Who could
level.
force her to confess?
On the other hand,
if
she was really
trapped because
exposed
she
in
could
the
not
future,
use it freely.
wouldn't it be fine if
Every
she
time
denied
she
it?
used the
When
move,
Shangwan Yu died,
she would be greatly
the entire
restricted.
Tianling
Moreover,
dynasty
every
was
time she
shaken.
used it,
Countless
she would
people
inevitably
suspected the
think
cause
of
of her
Shangwan
death.
Yu.
And
For
some
this
people
reason,
even almost
Shangwan Wan
found
would
out that
not
she
use
and
this
Jiang
move
Yuchun were
under
involved.
normal
But
circumstances.
didn't they solve the
However,
problem safely?
he needed to end the
end?
battle quickly.
Thank you for your
so
advice.
this was the best
Senior.
choice. No need to
Lines
thank me.
glowing
I have my
faintly
own reasons
appeared
for
on the
helping
palm.
you.
From
I'll give
afar,
you
they look like
15
palm
minutes.
prints.
If you still
The finer
can't
the
do it,
palm
don't
print
blame
was,
me.
the
for
stronger
not
the
giving you a
power it
chance.
contained.
Yes.
Different cultivators
Yes.
had different
Shangwan
insights
Wan didn't
and
dare to ask
understandings
any
of
more
this move.
questions.
So the palm
She
lines
quickly
they drew
sat
were
cross-legged
also
and began
However,
to look for a suitable
Shangwan Wan
person.
learned it from
The black
Shangwan,
rune floated
so her
back
palm
between
prints were
her
very
eyebrows.
similar to hers.
In fact, this
However,
process
it was
didn't
much
feel
simpler
anything
than Shangwan
but Shangwan Wan felt
when
that there was
Shangwan
something extra
Wan
on
finished
her
the last
forehead.
stroke.
And
The
it was
fifth
very
star
uncomfortable.
quietly appeared.
She held her
on
breath
Chu
and
Liyue's
closed her
fingertips.
eyes.
As
She
Chu
looked for
Liyue
someone,
looked up,
she
and her
thought to
gaze
herself,
lingered on
this black
Shangwan Wan's
rune,
palm print
actually,
for a moment.
even she
The
herself
corners of her
did
mouth
not
curled
know
up
when it had
slightly.
entered her body.
After
All
such a
these
long
years,
time,
other than the
Shangwan
two
Wan's
times it
cultivation
took
of the
the
initiative
initiative
to
palm
speak
did not
it almost
improve at
didn't
all.
exist.
Shangwan Wan was vaguely worried.
Well,
but she
her
had
Yuan
always tried her
meridian
best
was
to ignore
destroyed,
this matter,
so
and
she could
forget
not
its
even compare
existence.
to ordinary
She didn't expect it to
cultivators.
suddenly appear
How could she
today.
still comprehend
Moreover,
the
it
Ling Xiao
appeared in
palm?
such a strange
It must have
way.
been hard for her
Don't
to
try anything
memorize
funny.
these little by little.
Otherwise,
not
your
daring
fate
to
will be
forget them.
even more
Chu
miserable
Liyue raised her
and
hand
pitiful
gently
than you can imagine.
5 stars shone
The
brightly.
voice sounded
She had already
coldly in her mind.
memorized the
Shangwan Wan
stupefying
shivered
God
and responded.
by heart.
Then,
Therefore,
she forced
after
herself to
breaking
retract
through
her
to the
thoughts.
5th stage,
The entire
she
mystic
naturally
forest,
comprehended
except
the
for the
stupefying
area
God
where the
art.
mother tree
Now,
was,
because the force
had
in her body was
completely
much more
collapsed.
abundant.
As a result,
she could finally
all
light
the people
up
who were trapped
all 5
underground
stars.
followed the black
You think you can compete
swamp
with my palm
and
technique?
flowed towards them.
Shangwan Wan
roughly
She
checked,
cultivated the
and
martial
was suddenly
technique
surprised
of
to
the
find that the
Tianling
number
dynasty,
of people she could
which had been
sense was
passed
much
down for
less than
thousands
before.
of years.
It seemed
How could Chu
that there were
Liyue
fewer
compare to
people
it?
from the black
Chu
cavalry
Liyue did not
and a
seem to
small
hear
number
her
of disciples from the
gently
sect.
push her palm
She felt a
forward.
sense of
A silver palm
suffocation
print
in her
floated
chest.
in the air.
After
The
wasting
light was
so much
bright,
time,
but
just
not
now,
dazzling.
It was no
However,
wonder that there were
the
fewer
surrounding
people.
space
with so many
started to
people
collapse
there would
silently. definitely be
and a
people who
circle
could
of
break
black
free.
appeared.
Especially
The
those who
palm
were in
print
groups.
floated
Their
there
strength
quietly,
was
but
extremely
it contained a
strong
pressure
when
that
they were
could
united.
not be
If
underestimated.
she didn't use some special
Shangwan Wan's
methods,
expression
it would be difficult to
slightly.
keep them.
Chu
Just like the
Yue's
100 or
move
so
seemed
black
to be an
cavalry
Earth
from
stage
before,
martial
she had
technique.
spent a lot
She
of effort
frowned
to
and
trap
scolded
them.
herself for thinking too much.
She didn't expect
Even
that
if it was
in
an
the
Earth
end.
stage martial technique.
Shangwan Wan took
Chu
a deep
Yue
breath
was
and
so
found a
much
good
weaker
target.
than her.
She could not compete
Those
with
people
her.
from the purple
With a thought,
Shao
she
sword
pushed the
sect.
palm print out. What
Ling
Shangwan Wan
Xiaopong,
didn't know
the dark
was that
green
during the
palm
period of
print
time
flew
when she didn't do
forward
anything
noiselessly.
Chu Yue
At the same
and
time,
the others met
Chu
several groups of
Yue's
people
silver palm
and gathered
print
them all.
also started
Most
to
of
move.
them were from the black
She actually
cavalry,
chose to
and
fight
a small
head-on
number were
with
disciples
Shangwan
from the
Wan.
sect.
You
Fortunately,
overestimate yourself.
Other than one of the disciples
Shangwan
from
Wan
Dragon Teeth
sneered
Mountain who had
disdainfully.
died, The two palm prints quickly approached each other. Although they were all injured before they even touched, the power of both sides began to fight after some crazy treatment. The space between the two shattered. This was all thanks to Zhu Hong. At that time, even a crack had appeared to discover that Mu Hong Yu had left. A dark green light to bring people to look for her, crack. But something happened to Jiang did not notice this. He made a prompt decision and dragged everyone from Dragon and suddenly stared at the crack. When they fell into the swamp, something was wrong. They were still It was an intuition. It was even only later that he was unable to hold on. She still felt a faint sense of uneasiness in her heart. The distance between them wasn't very far. There was a fluctuation in front of her. There were also disciples from Holy Flame Palace after a fierce mansion who were the power of the Jingshan Palm. Roughly speaking, there were more than 300 people slowly retreat, including a small number of people although who had to stay in place because of their serious injuries. A lot of power. There were almost her level was much higher than Unknowingly, Chu Lu had become the backbone was also more abundant. After all, glance, only Chu Lu knew how to find the mastermind gradually gaining the upper hand. In addition, spurred on she had contracted a divine beast, palm, which attracted countless. It seemed that she intended to completely devour the Jingshan even Jiang Yuqing. At this moment, had the highest the Jingshan palm slightly suddenly exploded. Countless starlights. She stopped in her tracks and looked ahead. There's someone ahead. Shang Wan thought that she had mobile users. Please just as a smug smile appeared a better reading experience, she saw that the starlight did not dissipate. Instead, it burst out with a dazzling light. 7:30. For a moment, everyone stopped in unison and waited dazzling for light illuminated the place. They were almost used to doing this. Sizzle. Chu Lu when the light surrounded the Ling to investigate whenever there was a burst of ear-piercing sound. After confirming the it sounded like something was being burned. They would act according to Chu Lu's. The palm print began to shrink at first. Speed some people weren't to the naked eye. After all, an unpleasant smell quickly spread out. An overly beautiful was shocked. Really could not believe what she saw. Such things. How was this possible? But after Chu Lu led them to avoid was only a stage 5 warrior and saved even more people. How could her palm technique such doubts such terrifying disappeared? But at this moment, followed Chu Lu suddenly Lei Laosi followed. Her two hands formed a strange gesture sideways in front of her and smiled at her. Shang Wan took a look and felt that the gesture was somewhat familiar. We're so close. But she could not remember even if something really happens. Then Chu Lu raised her hand paused and gently drew in before speaking the starlight in the sky. It's always good just in case. Soon, it formed her Highness Shang Wan stared in this world and afraid that she would could be predicted isn't an accident. Chu Lu's movements were very slow. Her Highness was only one step away from becoming a stage 9 warrior. She even unconsciously sketched it in her mind. What happened slowly? She was finally realized that something was wrong and died. The pattern drawn by Chu Lu back then was gradually overlapping with the palm print pattern of her Highness. Second level, so others took advantage of her. Digression. Now that it happened, don't ask. They definitely wouldn't let such a thing happen at 6:30. Chu Lu looked again, stubborn Lei Laosi, and felt warmth in her heart. Slipping away. Thank you. Big mobile users, Lei Laosi growls and uncomfortably. A better reading experience unintentionally and vaguely saw a few people. They looked like a few young people, and the one at the front looked a little familiar. Chapter 743. Chu Lu the pattern drawn by Chu Lu were actually completely different from the palm Isn't this purple, however, for some reason, they were inexplicably three people beside him and gradually intertwined. Yang Qin was Shang Wan had a bad feeling. Song Qingyan had just cut off the tree roots that wrapped trying to clear her mind of them and was about to help the others. She had painstakingly memorized the palm prints. He immediately turned around. So there must not be any deviation. Who is it? Even so, he first saw Lei Laosi seem to be of much use and was secretly shocked. Now, she had been looking at it for quite a while, and she had been looking at it very seriously. He gripped the sword in his hand. She had clearly memorized. Lei Laosi had already recognized Song Qingyan, but he still had to pretend patterns. He sized up Song Qingyan. Those patterns were deeply engraved. You don't have to do this. If I want to attack you, get rid of them. None of you can stop me. Even if she wanted to. Song Qingyan frowned and was about to speak when he saw her memory of the second walking up from behind him was starting to become chaotic. Don't scare diagrams slowly intersected. Lei Laosi scoffed softly. It became a mess and crossed his arms. This situation was having no intention of helping at all. Shang Wan had no interest in saving the people of the purple but she had never encountered such a situation before. Why is it you? She had painstakingly learned still wary of Lei Laosi. And she had put in a lot of effort to learn it. Filled with in order to win a word of praise from her Imperial as if she wasn't injured at all, and to make everyone look at her in a new light. He had sacrificed so many treasures, secretly barely managed to hold on until now. Because she still looked much understanding of the Ling Xiao palm was more there must be something wrong with her than hers. Chu Yu's palm that the two of them executed was different. Even if she had
Qingyan
learned it
was
according to
still fine.
Shang Wan Yu's
Other than
palm
some
prints,
bloodstains on his
if
body,
an ordinary person
he was
did not
basically
look carefully,
uninjured.
they would
After
not
all,
notice any
he
problems.
was the young master
Moreover,
of the purple
Shang
Shao
Wan
sword
Wan had
sect,
always been
and he would
very
have
careful
many protective
and rarely
treasures on
used
him.
this move
The
in front of
others,
others.
on the other hand,
This was originally
were
a
little
move
more
that she had been
miserable.
thinking about for
However,
a long time.
Yang Qin,
and it was almost
seemed to be
engraved
fine
in her
too.
bones and blood.
Chu Luiyue
It was not
suddenly
that she had
recalled
never
that
fought
Song
with others
Qingyan
before,
seemed to be
but it had
hugging Yang
never been
Qin
like this. The more
in his
anxious
arms
Shang
just
Wan
now.
Wan was,
She smiled.
the more confused
Young
her
Master
mind
Song,
became.
don't worry.
Even the green
We were
palm
passing
print
by
was
here
affected
and came
and
over
the patterns
after
on the
hearing the
palm
commotion.
started
We
to
didn't
become
expect to meet you
chaotic.
guys. This
We wanted to
chaos
see if we
caused
could
the
help,
power of the
but
Ling
it seems
Xiao
like we don't
palm
need it
to
anymore.
decrease greatly.
Song Qingyan
Chu
sized
Luiyue
up
glanced
Chu
at Shang
Luiyue
Wan
suspiciously
and frowned.
Shang Wan Wan had
Help us?
already
You?
turned her gaze away.
His words were filled
trying not
with
to look
undisguised
at them.
contempt.
She held her head with
Chu
both
Luiyue
hands,
raised her brows
looking
slightly.
conflicted in pain.
Fine.
As if
Since
she had
already
already
said
said
so,
so,
why should she stick her warm
She
face
suddenly
to his
raised her
cold
head
butt
and screamed.
It seems like young Master
Luiyue,
Song doesn't
what kind of
think
trick are you
highly
playing?
of us.
Chu
So we won't
Luiyue
disturb you
chuckled,
anymore.
but his
Goodbye.
hands didn't stop
After
moving.
Chu Luiyue
The pattern in
finished
front of
speaking,
him
she
seemed
turned around
casual,
and left
but it had a
decisively.
strong regularity
Lei Laosi
to it.
chuckled.
Ordinary
and
people
immediately
wouldn't
followed her.
feel much.
Her
when they
Highness's
saw this
personality
pattern. At
seemed
most,
to have
they would
changed
feel
a little
dizzy
compared
after
to
looking
before.
at it for a long
If it were in the
time.
past,
But Shang Wan
her
Wan
Highness
was
would at
different.
least talk more
as
with
long as
Song
she saw it,
Qingyan on
she would
account
never
of the
forget
purple
it,
Shao sword
because
set.
this pattern
But now
was the third
she
level
turned
of the
around
Ling Xiao
and left
palm.
without saying anything. Awesome. Seeing that Chu Luiyue
Back
and
then,
Lei Laosi
after Chu
really
Luiyue
left
broke
so
decisively
through to the eighth
Song
rank,
Qingyan was
he
stunned.
began to cultivate
What
the
exactly
last
does
level
this mean?
of the Ling Xiao
Looking
palm.
at the two of
Her
them,
comprehension ability
Song Qingyan
was
frowned,
extremely
and
high,
anger rose
and it
in
did
his
not
heart.
take her long
A mere
to
Chu
completely
Luiyue
comprehend it.
actually dared
But
to
no one knew
throw
about
such
it
a look at
except
me.
herself.
My purple Shao
Even his
sword
father,
sect,
the
doesn't
Emperor,
need
knew
anyone's
nothing
help at
about
all.
this.
Let alone
At that time,
Chu Luiyue.
she just did it
What a
as
joke.
a matter of course.
Did she
and
think
did
that
not
she could
think of
intimidate
announcing it to
others
show off?
just because she
After
called
all,
an unknown,
she was already the
powerful
most
figure over?
noble.
He retracted his
existence.
gaze in disgust.
Naturally, she
and
did not
pulled
need
Yang
to use
Qin
such a
Er,
method
who was
to prove
closest
her
to him,
excellence like
up
Shang
before
Wan Wan.
cutting off the
And
tree
now,
roots on her body.
this had given her a lot
Qin
of
Er,
convenience.
you shouldn't be so
because
weak.
he was worried about
Is there something
exposing his
wrong with your
identity.
body?
Chu Luiyue
Song
had
Qingyan
not used
asked
any of
casually.
the martial arts
Yang
skills he
Qin
knew
Er's
since his
face
rebirth.
tightened.
If
She
not for Shang
instinctively
Wan Wan's
moved her
move
wrist
today,
back.
Chu
As the
Luiyue
surroundings
would
were
not
dark,
have thought of
Song
using this move
Qingyan
to deal
didn't
with her.
see the change
The
in her
cultivation of the
expression.
Ling Xiao
No,
palm
maybe
was
I'm
divided
tired from the
into
long
3
journey.
levels.
Also,
Each
I'm at a
level was a
bottleneck in
summary
my
and
cultivation
transcendence
recently of
of
the previous level.
Song Qingyan
and the
didn't
third
really
level
suspect
was even more
anything.
so.
So he
Shang
believed her
Wan Wan
after
had
hearing what she
cultivated
said.
the second
It's
level.
fine.
And the
With
palm
me around,
print had already
I'll
left
definitely
a
protect
deep
you.
imprint.
Yang
Qin
Qin
now,
looked at him gratefully
as long as she
and
saw the
thanked him
patterns on the
repeatedly.
third level, Song
She would
Qingyan
involuntarily
was in a great mood
start
from
to
her
cultivate
admiring
according
and
to this
admiring
level.
gaze. But she
So
didn't
he
even
threw
comprehend
Chu Luiyue's
the
matter to
second
the
level,
back of his mind,
let alone the third level.
After
Then,
looking at it,
he made
the
a move
only
again,
result was
planning
that
to pull the
this
remaining
part of
two
Shang
people
Wan
up.
Wan's cultivation
We have to get out
was
of this damn
completely
place
disintegrated.
as soon as possible.
Shang Wan Wan herself
before he finished
must
speaking,
have realized
a cold
that something
wind
was wrong,
suddenly came
which
from
was
the
why she was
darkness.
so
Swoosh.
flustered and
The
exasperated.
sound of something breaking through the
Unfortunately,
air was heard.
It was too late.
Several thick
Chu
tree roots
Luiyue
were
did not
thrown
say a
toward the
word,
few of them
and
at the
only
same
continued
time.
to outline
Song
the
Qingyan
remaining
knew
patterns.
that this was bad.
When Shang
and
Wan Wan
immediately
raised her head
pulled
and
Yang
accidentally
Qin
saw it
into his arms.
she only felt
Then he
as if
dodged
someone had
backward
taken a knife
with his
and
move,
forcefully
the remaining
carved this
two
pattern in
people
her
who
mind.
hadn't been pulled out of the swamp
Sensing that the
were
impression in her
tightly
mind was
entangled
becoming
by the
more
tree
and
roots.
more chaotic,
Save
Shang
us.
Wan Wan
The
finally
short
couldn't
cry
take it anymore
for help
and
came to
screamed.
an abrupt end.
Then,
Crack.
she rushed towards
The sound
Chu
of bones
Luiyue with
breaking could be
scarlet
heard.
eyes. The tree
Slut,
roots
trying
actually
to
wrapped
mystify
around their necks
and mystify
and
in front of
twisted
this
violently.
consort.
Their heads
courting
were
death.
tilted in a strange
Chu
posture,
Luiyue's eyes
and their
narrowed
eyeballs
dangerously.
protruded.
He
Not
hooked his
long
finger
after,
lightly
they completely
and added
stopped
the last
breathing.
pattern.
Finally,
Chu
he
Luiyue
stopped.
turned around with a
Shang
sharp
Wan Wan
gaze.
was getting closer.
She tapped her
and
toes
closer,
and immediately
she was about to
flew
charge
over.
At the
Chu
same
Luiyue
time,
pulled with
she
both
raised her
hands.
wrist,
That
and a ball
huge
of scarlet
pattern
flames
instantly
transformed
transformed into a fire Shangwan Wan only saw a flash in front of her eyes. Tree roots. That strange pattern appeared in front of her again. Dumpling's wings spoke softly, and a colorful stream as if he was guiding her, light, but also as if he was It intertwined with the scarlet. Let's see how your Ling Xiao palm. The flames directly as soon as he finished speaking, the tree roots. Shangwan Wan's mind exploded all the way. Ling Xiao palm. The boiling temperature in an instant caught Shangwan. It was as if something had suddenly she screamed. As if all of flames flew over. The two patterns in her mind. It actually directly penetrated the barrier. The second layer of toward Shangwan Wan's, which was deeply imprinted like a brand, subconsciously injected her force into pure gold armor. However, not only was the pure gold body trembled, not activated, and she violently but also repelled all her power. Blood. A look of she clearly felt as if something was rapidly flowing out of her body. The pure
Ling Xiao
gold
Palm,
armor.
Ling Xiao
And it even
Palm.
had an owner.
Shangwan
Digression.
raised her eyes
Today
with difficulty
is the last day
and
of
looked
June.
at the shattered
Those who
palm
have
print.
tickets only to
Please
see
don't
that the
forget to
palm
vote.
lines on ahead.
The tickets will be voided
shattered.
tomorrow.
Chu
Mobile
Yue's
users,
eyes
please
were
browse
cold
and read.
and sharp.
A better reading
He formed a whip
experience
with his
from love.
force and viciously lashed it out. Smack! That
Chapter
ghostly green
734.
palm print
The
collapsed
shattered
along
barrier
with it.
instantly
What she could give
transformed
Shangwan
into
Wan
countless
back then,
streams of
she could
light
take away today
and condensed
Ling
in
Xiao
front
Palm.
of Shangwan
She didn't
Wan
deserve
again.
it. At the
Mobile
same
users,
time,
please
a black
browse
ripple
for a better
rippled out
reading
from the
experience
runes
from
between
Love Network.
Shangwan Wan's eyebrows. Quietly, it stuck to the enchantment. Buzz. A terrifying pressure
Chapter
spread out.
744.
Boom. The
Shangwan
Shangwan
Wan
let out a
collided
shrill
together.
cry as
That
she
ball
hugged
of
her head
flame
in
was
extreme
finally
pain.
blocked outside.
She frantically wanted
However,
to keep all the
barrier
memories
was
of the
also
Ling Xiao
shaking
Palm in her
violently.
mind.
However,
However, would shatter
everything
at
was
any
like
time.
sand in her hands.
Shangwan Wan's face
The more she
was
tried to
filled with
salvage
fear.
it, the
Almost
more futile
just now
her
she almost
efforts
she
were.
truly felt the
Previously,
surging.
her mind was in a
terrifying
mess,
power
but now
contained in that ball.
it gradually became
If that
blank.
attack really
No,
landed on her body,
no.
she
I
was
learned the Ling
afraid
Xiao
that
Palm.
Shangwan Wan looked at the pure
How can I
gold
forget it
sacred
just like
armor
that?
on her body.
Once
and
I
paused
fall
for a
to the
moment.
second stage
Then,
today,
as though she had
it will
gone
be
crazy,
harder than ascending
she
to
quickly
heaven
took
if
off
I
the
want to
pure
cultivate
gold
again
sacred
in the
armor.
future.
Her actions
Shangwan
were
Wan
very
panicked
fast as she
There was a
panted
trace
heavily.
of deep fear.
One of her
in
hands
anger.
unconsciously
She didn't even care that
tugged
her
at
hair
and clothes
causing
were
strands
messed
of
up.
hair to fall.
Bang.
However,
Shangwan Wan,
through the pure
could no
gold
longer
sacred
care about
armor
it.
on the ground.
The strange
As though
pattern
she was
that
afraid
Chu
of something,
Luiwei drew
she took 2
forcefully
steps back.
destroyed the Ling
However,
Xiao Palm.
her
in
eyes were
mind.
still
It
staring
was as if
at
it was
it.
effortless.
Her eyes were cold
when the last
and
pattern
ruthless
completely
with raging
disappeared.
anger.
Shangwan
It was as though she
Wan's
wanted to burn a
actions
hole
finally
in the
slowed
pure
down.
gold
It's
sacred
gone. It's really
armor.
gone.
How
I
is
really
this
fell
possible?
to the second
How is
stage
this possible?
of the Ling Xiao Palm.
Shangwan Wan
No
muttered
matter
to
how
herself.
hard I tried to
Her
recall,
face was green
there was
and
nothing
white.
in my mind.
Her chest
When
was
I thought
heaving
about it for a
up
long
and down
time,
violently.
I would even feel
as
a
she
sharp
panted
pain.
heavily.
Shangwan
She
Wan
clenched her
weakly
fists
took 2
tightly.
steps back.
Her nails
Her
dug
legs
deep
turned
in her
to jelly,
palms,
and
she
blood
almost
dripped
fell
down.
to the ground.
However,
Chu Luiwei
how could she care
gently
about that at
exhaled,
this moment?
and his back
Countless
was drenched
thoughts
in sweat.
flashed
Actually,
through her mind.
with her current
It was as
stage
though her
5
head
warrior
was going to
abilities,
explode.
It was very
The pure
difficult
gold
for
sacred
her
armor
to execute
used to
the
belong
third
to
stage
Shangwan
of the
Yu.
Ling Xiao Palm.
After Shangwan
Even
Yu
just drawing
died,
the pattern
the
had
pure
used up
gold
a lot
sacred
of her
armor
force.
became
Without
an
the support
ownerless
of the
item.
water droplet
Logically
in her
speaking,
Dantian,
under such
she
circumstances,
definitely wouldn't have been able to
anyone
do
could
this.
activate the pure
This attack
gold sacred
seemed
armor
very simple,
as long as they
but it had
poured their
actually
force
used up
into it.
more than half
However,
of her body's
just
strength.
now,
However,
when Shangwan
the
Wan
good
wanted
thing
to
was
do
that the
so,
effect was not
she was
bad.
shocked to find that
It
her
seems like your
force
so-called
couldn't be poured
Ling
into the
Xiao
pure
Palm
gold
isn't very
sacred
good.
armor.
Chu
Didn't
Luiwei
this
spoke
mean
softly
that
with
the
a
pure
smile on
gold
his
armor
lips.
still
When
had an
Shangwan
owner?
Wan heard
No, it
this
can't
voice,
She's
it was as
already
if she
dead.
suddenly
How
realized
could it
something
be?
as she
Shangwan
suddenly
Wan's
looked up.
lips trembled.
Her eyes
She
were
kept
bloodshot,
comforting herself,
and her face
but her
was
heart
filled
was
with
still
resentment.
beating violently.
Luiwei.
Thinking about the situation,
Shangwan Wan called
just
out
now,
Chu
she couldn't
Yue's
calm
name
down no matter how
Every
hard
word
she
seemed
tried,
to be squeezed
let
out
alone
from between her teeth.
convince herself.
His tone was filled
the pure
with
gold
deep
armor
resentment,
lay
as if he
quietly on
wanted
the ground.
nothing more
It was
than to
exactly
drink
the
his
same
blood
as when
and
Shangwan
eat his
Wan
flesh.
first took it out.
He had thought
There
that
was
he
nothing
could
wrong
easily
with
get
it.
rid of
Shangwan
Luiwei,
Wan stared at him,
but he had not
her
expected to
expression
suffer a
changing.
double loss.
No,
there was
Shangwan Yu
something
was
wrong
definitely
with
dead
Chu
back then.
Luiwei. His
The move
physical
she
body
used just
had
now
perished,
was a
and his
despicable
soul had
move
dispersed
that he didn't know
She had
where
seen it
learned
with her
from.
own eyes.
Shangwan Wan
There was no
couldn't
way
figure
she
it
was
out,
still alive,
but she didn't want to
Thinking of
continue
this,
investigating.
Shangwan Wan took a
There was
deep
only
breath
one thought
and
in
tried
her
to
mind
calm
right
herself
now.
down.
To kill Chu Luiwei.
Could
If
it
Chu
be
Luiwei was
because
not
the
dealt
last
with today,
bit of
there
origin
would be
power
no
in her
into trouble
body
in the future.
hadn't fully recovered?
Although she didn't like Chu
She turned her
Luiwei
head
before,
to take a look.
she didn't take Chu
The few
Luiwei
tree roots that he had
seriously
sent
at
out
all.
earlier had all been burned.
It wasn't easy for him to find
today,
the right opportunity
Shangwan Wan
to kill
finally
the two
realized
purple
that
Chu
Xiao
Luiwei
sword
was much
sect
harder to
disciples.
deal with than she had
However,
expected. Before he
anger
could devour
and
their
resentment
strength
surged
he
in
had
her heart.
already
Almost
Shangwan
bursting
Wan was
out of
so
Shangwan
angry that her
Wan's
lungs were
chest.
about to explode.
Her intense
This
emotions
person definitely
made her
did it on
crazy,
purpose,
and her facial
this ball of
features were
fire
slightly destroyed.
She looked at the ball of
in the
fire
depths of her
coldly
eyes,
and
a
resentfully.
dark green
fire
in the center
could
of the
be
red
vaguely
flame,
seen.
there was a
It looked like a
gorgeous,
ferocious
colorful
stream
ghost.
of light
Shoo.
that was also
At this point,
dancing.
a clear
It seemed to
cry
be
was
monitoring
heard,
and
Shang
also
Wan was
provocation.
shocked.
She
He guessed
turned
right.
around and
This
saw
is
that the
indeed
crimson gold
Chu
phoenix
Liu
had
Yue's
already
power.
broken free from
That
the black
hoarse
net
voice
and
sounded
was
again.
angrily rushing
Shang Wan
out.
Wan's heart
It was
sank.
heading straight for
She
her.
couldn't help but
The
frown.
red fire
But the power
surged,
contained in
and the
his
entire
clearly
space
stronger than
instantly
Chu Liu
turned
Yuan
into a
not
sea
done yet.
of fire.
Voice
The crimson
lazily
gold phoenix's
interrupted
crystal-like
Shang Wan Wan.
eyes
Other than
flashed
her,
with
there's also the
extremely
red-tailed
cold
murderous
red phoenix,
intent,
which is
Shang
the
Wan Wan's
nine-colored
entire
heavenly
body
pheasant
turned
that
cold.
was about to break
It was as if
through
she
at the
was
beginning.
instantly surrounded by
Shang
the
Wan
Grim
Wan
Reaper.
widened her eyes
Danger.
in shock.
She hurriedly got up and
you
ran
mean
away with
the nine-colored
thinking.
heavenly pheasant
But the moment
has
she turned
successfully
around,
broken through
a fire
to become a red-tailed
suddenly
red
attacked
phoenix.
her.
Poof.
And Chu Luiyue.
Shang Wan was shocked.
Chu Luiyue was
She
able
hurriedly
to move together with
dodged
the red-tailed
and
red
accidentally fell to
It
the
was
ground.
self-evident.
Lowering
what it
her
meant.
head, this
She saw that her
Luiyue's
skirt
luck
already
isn't
stained
ordinary.
with the red
A
fire.
divine beast like
She
the red-tailed
hurriedly
red
extinguished
phoenix
the fire.
is extremely arrogant.
However,
under
Dumpling
normal
had the
circumstances,
intention to kill this
it wouldn't
time.
form a
How could you
contract
let her
with a
off
human,
so
especially
easily?
with a mere
The surrounding
stage 5
flames
warrior.
burned
That
crazily,
voice had a layer of
and
coldness.
from all directions,
It was obvious
they rushed
that it was
towards
also
Shang Wan
very
Wan to
surprised
kill
by
her.
this matter.
In a moment
Yeah,
of desperation,
you worked so hard.
Shang
but
Wan
in
Wan
the end,
hurriedly set
it was
up
all for
a
someone
barrier
else.
around her.
These words
At
were
the same
full
time,
of ridicule.
she ran
Shang Wan
towards
Wan
the
was
crimson
already
gold
in deep
armor
shock.
that was thrown
Being
on the ground.
ridiculed like
Even
this
if the
made her
crimson
feel
gold armor
even
had
worse.
not
Her
officially
hatred for Chu
recognized her as its
Luiyue
owner
also deepened.
when she wore it.
She had only jumped
would
down
still be
to
able to
repair
provide
her
some
Yuan
defense.
Meridian.
How
Shang
long had
Wan
it
Wan
been?
was forced to
Yet,
the point
Chu
that she
Luiyue
had
had
no
taken
other
the initiative.
choice.
Divine
In a state
beast.
of panic,
That was a
she could
real
only
divine
think
beast.
of these methods.
She hadn't even seen it before.
But
just
in
as
the
she was
blink of an
about
eye,
to reach
Chu
the crimson
Luiyue
gold
had already
armor,
formed a
a
contract
terrifying aura
Bitch,
suddenly
it's useless
attacked
to
from
say
side.
this now. Shang
Even if
Wan
a divine
Wan was
beast
stunned,
soul is
and a trace
destroyed,
of fear
it won't
surged in her
recognize the
heart.
second master.
Suddenly,
You don't
a
have to
black
think about
rune
this anymore.
appeared in the void.
Besides,
blocking
Chu Luiyue
in
has
front
probably
of
guessed what
Shang
you're
Wan
doing
Wan.
now.
The
Boom.
most important thing
the two
now
forces
is to repair
collided
your Yuan
fiercely
Meridian.
Chu
and leave this
Luiyue's
place.
pupils constricted.
Thank you for your guidance.
The fireball
Senior.
formed by the
Shang
red
Wan
flames
Wan
was
suppressed the
actually
resentment
completely
in her
blocked
heart
with
by the
great
black
difficulty.
rune.
With the help
However,
of the black rune,
deep in her
Shang
heart,
Wan Wan
she was
successfully
still
put on the
brooding
crimson
over this
gold
matter.
armor again. The black
Touching the
patterns on the
cold
barrier
and hard
suddenly
armor,
scattered.
Shang Wan
Like a
Wan's
drop
heart
of
calmed
ink
down.
dripping into
Chu
water.
Luiyue
The
stared at the
entire
black
barrier
rune
was quickly
and narrowed his
died
eyes.
This
This
was
was
Shang
Shang
Wan's
Wan
figure
Wan's
was
true
gradually
backing.
covered by the barrier.
Shang Wan Wan was
She thought
protected
to
by the
herself,
barrier
and finally had time to breathe.
Chu Luiyue,
She
must
said in her
be with
heart,
the people from the Purple
"Thank
Shao
you, Senior."
sword sect now.
However,
Since that was
the
the
other
case,
party
she
only
could just find
replied
someone else
coldly.
to attack.
Useless
She didn't
thing.
believe that
Shang Wan Wan was
could
reprimanded,
really stop her,
but she didn't dare
Shang Wan
to
Wan
refute.
sat
She didn't even
cross-legged
dare
with her
to
hands
show a
on her
trace
knee.
of dissatisfaction.
Unconsciously,
She
she
didn't
glanced
expect
at the
that she would
pure
be
gold
forced to
armor
such a state
lying
by a
quietly
mere
on the ground
Chu
again.
Luiyue.
Uneasiness
Senior
rose
rose
in
in her heart. When she was fully recovered, she must take the pure gold armor for herself.
It's all this junior's
the
fault
black
for
runes
underestimating
fluttered
the enemy.
gently.
Even
An
if you
invisible
use your
ripple
full
flew
strength
towards the ball
I'm
of
afraid
flame.
the situation won't be
Boom.
any better
The
than
flame
now,
exploded.
Right?
That
Even
hoarse
the
voice
roots
of
of
the
the tree
were
were
blasted away.
Don't
by
forget,
the explosion.
you're now a trash
Chu
who hasn't
Luiyue
even
quickly
recovered your
retreated.
Yuan Meridian.
Dumpling
Shang
flapped
Wan
her
Wan
wings,
might be able to gain
and
the
a
upper hand
hurricane
in the first
suddenly
few moves,
appeared.
but as
All
time
of the chaotic
passed,
energy
she wouldn't
was
be able to
blocked.
hold on.
After
In
a
the end,
series of explosions,
wasn't she still being beaten
the
up by
entire
Chu
space
Luiyue?
finally quieted
Shang
down.
Wan Wan bit
Chu
her
Luiyue
lips
frowned
angrily.
Someone was helping
and a
Shang
trace
Wan
of
Wan.
blood seeped
Unfortunately,
out of her lips.
the other party
However,
acted too
her
quickly.
lips and teeth
She
were
couldn't see
already
it clearly.
full of blood.
The key
This was
was
not
that this
worth
person
mentioning at all.
was
In
extremely
the end,
powerful.
I still have to do
Even
it
Lei
personally.
Laosi
That
might not be
voice
the
said
other party's
coldly.
match.
Shang Wan
When
Wan
did
was
Shang
shocked
Wan Wan
and
have
felt
such a
complicated.
mysterious,
Senior
and
buzz.
powerful helper?
A strange
sobbing
buzz could be
sound
heard
came from behind.
all of a sudden.
Chu Luiyue
Then,
turned around.
the black runes
Yang
slowly
Qin
flew to
was
Shang
covering
Wan
her
Wan's
face
glabella.
and crying in
This
front
time,
of the two disciples.
the edge of the
who
black
were already
rune
dead.
seemed to be
She
burning
seemed to be
with
very
flames
sorrowful
and
It's
curled
all my fault.
slightly.
Senior
Before
brother,
Shang Wan Wan
you shouldn't
could
have
speak,
saved me
there was a
first.
subtle change in
Song
her
Qingyan
expression.
was also
Her
upset
expression
because of the
quickly
loss of these
faded
two
away,
disciples. But
leaving
when he heard
only
Yang
indifference
Qin
and
crying
coldness.
like that, his
Her
heart
eyes also became
immediately
even more scarlet.
How can I blame you?
Her entire
You were the
body
closest
was
to me
filled
back
with a
then.
monstrous,
Who should I save if
murderous
not you?
aura.
Yang
Chu
Qin
Luiyue's
sobbed as she
heart
looked at him
skipped a beat.
pitifully
Dumpling,
and innocently with
hearing
her
her
red
call,
eyes.
Dumpling,
who had
if
intended
Miss
to
Chu had
fight
taken
head-on,
action earlier,
quickly
flew back.
Perhaps it would have been
The next
different.
moment, Shang Wan
Mobile
Wan raised her
users,
hand,
please
and
browse
tapped
and
lightly
read.
in the air.
A better reading
Boom.
experience
A violent
comes
gale
from Love
spread
Network.
out in all directions. The space around Chu Luiyue quickly collapsed.
Chapter 735.
Her body
Upon
flew
hearing
forward
that,
uncontrolled.
Chu Luiyue raised his
Mobile
eyebrows
users,
and turned
please
around.
browse for a
Miss
better
Yang, what
reading
do you mean
experience
by
from
that?
Love Network.
Yang Qin glanced at Chu Luiyue. Her heart skipped a beat when she met his dark jade-like eyes. She
Chapter
quickly looked away
745. as if she was on fire.
Shang Wan's
She
hand
took half
went
a step
straight
back,
for Chu Liu
as if she was
Yue's
frightened
slender
by
neck.
Chu.
It was as if with a
appearance.
slight twist,
Miss Chu,
she could break
don't
this
misunderstand.
slender and fair
I was
neck
just
and
saying
completely
it
take
casually.
away
I didn't mean
Chu
anything
Yue's
else.
These two senior brothers'
entire
entire body was enveloped by a
terrifying
terrifying
pressure
pressure
of the purple
and
Shao
she
Sword
couldn't
sect.
move.
A
It's a pity that
murderous
they died
intent
like this.
flashed across
I'm blaming
Dumpling's
myself.
eyes.
If I
and
hadn't
she
insisted on
immediately
asking
chased
for help
after
just
her.
now,
Shang
all
Wan
of this
might
raised
not
her
have
eyes
happened
and looked
when
at
Chu
Dumpling
Liyue heard this.
expressionlessly.
She looked
The huge
nonchalant
net
that she
and
had
her
just
lips
broken
curved free
into
from
a
was
cold
once
smile.
again blocking
He thought
in
that
front of
Yang
her.
Qin,
Moreover,
would be more
this net had
obedient
clearly
after the
been
previous
repaired.
incident,
and it
He
was
didn't
even more
expect her
dense
to still be able to
difficult
distort
deal
the
with than
truth
before,
and
Dumpling's
not
speed
distinguish
slowed
right
down
from wrong.
However,
in this moment of
Song
slowing
Qingyan
down,
listened to him,
The distance between Qing's shoulder gently and comforted her softly. Shangguan Wan's meticulously trimmed nails were about to scratch. This matter has nothing to do with you at all. Creamy skin. Don't blame yourself anymore. A vigorous aura after saying erupted from he looked at Chu Liyue's body. The gentle expression on his face instantly finally cracked. She retreated in shock, and nose were no longer his eyes, still fixed on Chu Liyue. No longer his nose. No wonder you're so arrogant. Chu Liyue. So you still have such a trump card. Er's words are not without reason. Just now, since you can get rid of those above a ninth stage warrior easily. Chu Liyue's why didn't you take action actually hid the two of them were hanged? Such a strong I think you did on purpose. Although Shangguan Wan's voice had once unintentionally mentioned that she had unintentionally offended as if she had changed into a different person. Because the purple without her control and threat and the Chongshu Pavilion had always disliked each other. When her feet stepped on the ground had intentionally, she let out a long breath in her heart difficult and said gratefully, recently, Chu Liyue had become she really didn't expect that Taizu would take the initiative to attack in that coupled with Yangqin, Er's nonsense. Taizu didn't say anything. He was even more disgusted, but he firmly protected Chu Liyue. Therefore, at this moment, Shangguan Wan looked he directly pushed all the blame onto Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue also looked up at the other side, so angry that this time both sides fell into a short silence. I was the one who offered help at first. The air seemed to have condensed. Why is it my fault suffocating? Young master song. This was a duel between already forgotten what you said at the beginning. Song Qing but in reality, and his face quickly turned red. Suddenly, at that time, there was a fluctuation in the air. Shangguan Wan immediately turned her head to look. Who knew that her expression was actually so this scene must not be seen there were a total of 10 just as she was about to purple Shao sword she suddenly heard a sound that had already died, and now another two had died. Other than him and something had broken. Shangguan Wan, the rest of them were still missing. A crack suddenly appeared in the middle of the stone platform. Even if Song Qingyan Chu Liyue also saw this scene. He couldn't help but in reality, she knew that this crack had he was the one who had brought people there. Crack. And all of them crack was slowly but surely spreading in all directions, expanding at a speed visible now to the naked eye. But there were so many casualties. The uneasiness in he didn't know how to explain it when he returned. Grew stronger. This resentment she quickly naturally vented on Chu just as a hand touched Dumpling's neck. Those who were dragged down green light more or rush out from the crack. But you were the only one who was the entire stone platform. You know better than anyone else what exactly began to collapse here. At the same time, the situation countless tree roots fell from above, but you still chose to stand by and watch. If you really wanted to save them, they swept toward the two of them ago. Chu Liyue why wait until quickly jumped on a dumpling's back. Chu Liyue was however at that sighing at the entire stone increasing ability to pester faint green light when he heard up the entire space. What the F a terrifying suction force came just as Song Qingyan was Shangguan Wan's feet were empty. He shuddered after being yelled at by Lei Laosi. She was about to be devoured. Swallowed the rest of his words. At that moment, he looked at Lei Laosi, grabbed a tree root and shook it to Chu Liyue. Why you? Who was he? She had never been insulted like this to his face. Chu Liyue it was extremely unpleasant, but she suddenly realized that she could not use the saving you as kindness. It was the same for Taizu's is my duty. In that moment, we came over with Shangguan Wan grabbed Chu Liyue, and it's fine if you don't appreciate it. She pulled fiercely. In the end, everything happened too quickly. If you're so capable, Chu Liyue, why don't you save them yourself? She was already aren't they all from your purple Shao? Chu Liyue raised her leg. What has it got to do with us? Shangguan Wan. Don't think that I can't tell. Shangguan Wan's clearly at the same immediately turned to the as side those people from a kick. Just now, a few of her teeth. Just that you're selfish and dirty. In her panic, so you saved this one. She only had time to put on the. I heard that you're the purple Shao sword and forgot to put on a helmet. However, if the purple Shao sword sex people as long as Chu Liyue did not hurt her head or disciple for a woman, she could easily take down Chu Liyue. Lei Laosi scolded Song Qingyan like a cannonball. Both of them could not Chu Liyue touched his nose. They could only rely on their physical strength. Lei Laosi was a rather Shangguan Wan's eyes were fierce. He didn't expect his appearance to change Liyue's ankle tightly, and his ability to scold people had also improved. Chu Liyue fell. Song Qingyan flapped her wings until he scratched Shangguan Wan's face, and he was so angry. Her sharp claws instantly scratched Shangguan Wan's face was stronger. The few scratches, although he was arrogant, they were so deep that the bones wasn't brainless at all. Shangguan Wan screamed here and was about to think of a way to retaliate when after scolding Song Qingyan, after Chu Lei Laosi looked at saving master is more important. As for Shangguan Wan, coward, when we meet again and hid behind Song Qingyan, I will definitely return the favor. Why are you hiding? Dumpling's figure followed closely behind meant Chu Liyue and disappeared into the dense, faint He only knew that anyone who offended Shangguan Wan hugged had a tree root tightly. You don't look old, afraid that she would accidentally fall down. Discord. Who knows if your mouth doesn't know how to speak? At this moment, I'll sew it up. The air was torn apart. Yangqin, two silhouettes walked out, one that she hurriedly covered her mouth. It was Qin and hid behind Song Wanzhou. The
She
black
didn't dare
rune on
to make a
Shangwan
sound,
Wan's
and
glabella
only her
instantly
tears
disappeared.
fell.
She
The
hugged
dazed
Song
expression on
Qingyan's
her
face
arm
and
shivered
gradually
as though
faded,
she was terrified.
and she returned to
If
her
it were
previous
any other
look
time,
filled with
Song
anger and
Qingyan would
resentment.
definitely stand
She
up
shuddered.
for her. Just
But
now,
now, was I being controlled by that person just now?
He was just forcing
She's right
himself
here.
to stand there.
Chang
So how could he
Wanzhou
care about
was
Yang
speaking
Qin
when he suddenly saw
Chu
the
Luo
scene
looked
in
at
front
the
of him.
two of them,
Shock
in
flashed
such a
across his
sorry
eyes,
state,
and his
wasn't
voice
interested at
stopped
all.
abruptly.
They were just things
Qin,
that weren't
he reacted
presentable.
faster than
Now,
when he
the
saw
person
the
I'm most
stage that
worried
was
about
almost
is still
completely
Shang
collapsing,
Wanwan.
and
With
the
someone
strange,
helping,
faint
I can't
green light
freely
in the
investigate Shang
he
Wanwan's
immediately
situation
realized
anymore.
that something was amiss.
Shang Wanwan,
He quickened
I'm
his
afraid
steps
she's
and
really
rushed
going to
over.
recover her
In the
Yuan
end,
meridian.
he saw
A
a
series
Shang
of
Wanwan
footsteps
struggling
heard.
to climb up.
Chu Luo
Other
turned
than
around
her,
and
there
saw
was
that
no
it was
one else
actually
around.
Jiang Yuqing
Chu
and the
Luo
rest.
isn't here.
It turned out that they stayed here for too long and didn't go back.
The
Qinyi's
people
gaze
behind
finally
were
landed
anxious
on
from
the abyss
waiting.
below, so they
Other than
simply
the
came
blinding
together.
light.
He couldn't
Seeing
see
Jiang
anything
Yuqing
in front.
He was just
Song
standing at the
Qingyan
edge,
immediately
but he felt like he was
seemed
about to be
have found a backer.
swallowed.
Yuqing,
Where is she?
He and
Chang
Jiang Yuqing
Wanzhou
were close
also
in age,
followed over,
and their family
stared at Shang
backgrounds weren't
Wanwan
bad.
as he
Thus,
questioned her
they'd
coldly.
always been in contact.
Shang Wanwan recognized
Jiang Yuqing's
the two
gaze
of them
first
and
landed
felt a chill
on Chu
in her heart.
Luo.
However,
After confirming
she
that she
still
was
forced
fine,
herself to
his
say,
heart relaxed
"It's good that
slightly
you're
before
here.
he looked
It's good
at
that you're
Song
here.
Qingyan.
Hurry,
Qingyan,
and save me.
So it's you guys.
Chang
What
Wanzhou's
happened?
voice was even
Why
colder.
are you in such a sorry
I'm asking
state?
you, where is she?
Song Qingyan
Shang Wanwan
could
could
only
only
pretend
and
that
walk
she didn't
to
know.
Jiang Yuqing's
What are you
side.
talking about?
Just as he was
Who is
about
she?
to speak,
I'm the
he
only one
remembered
here from
lay
start to
lousy
end.
at the side.
Hurry,
and
hurriedly
and pull me
lowered
up.
his voice.
She can't hold on for too
Yuqing,
long.
you guys must be
just by
careful
relying on her
Chu
own strength.
Luo. Someone
She
must
has a
bring her
problem.
out from the outside.
Jiang Yuqing's
Murderous
expression
intent
changed
appeared
slightly.
on Chang
Song
Wanzhou's
Qingyan
face.
continued.
I
Her
can
relationship
clearly
with
feel
that man
Chu
is
unclear.
unclear.
Just
Aura
now,
here.
she must have been here before. Looking at Shang Wanwan's
That's
haggard
strange.
appearance.
The two
She
of them
clearly
previously
just
said
went
that they
through
would
an
come over to
intense
take a
battle.
look.
Logically
Logically
speaking,
Chang Wanzhou
they
suddenly
wouldn't
pulled
do
out his
such a
sword.
thing.
A
How could
sparrow
Jiang
blue
Yuqing
flame
not
flashed
guess Song
past.
Qingyan's thoughts?
He held the cloud
If it were in
sky
the
copper
past,
sword
he might
tightly
still
in
have
his
the
hands.
patience to feign
Then
civility.
he slashed at the tree
But
root
now,
that
hearing
Shang
that Chu
Wanwan was
Luo
hugging.
was being
Since
slandered,
Shang
he
Wanwan
was
isn't willing
very
to tell the
unhappy.
truth.
He
Then
looked at Chu Luo.
I'll just kill her.
Luo, are you
Digression.
okay? It's
Chu
better to be
Luo's
together
face
at 6
turned
p.m.
cold,
for the rest of the time.
and her stomach
My
churned.
5-year-old computer
Digression.
is barely
I couldn't sleep
hanging on,
yesterday.
and
Added
the
exhaust
exhaust
fan
is so hot.
Mobile
that you can
users,
fry an egg on
please
it.
browse and
I brought
read.
it to be repaired.
A better reading
Mending
experience
and mending
comes
for
from
another
Love
3
Network.
years. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI Web. Chapter 746. A piercing sword light flashed across. Shang Wanwan's heart skipped a beat. She watched as the cloud sky copper sword was about to cut that tree root. But just as it was about to touch it, Qin Yi suddenly pressed down on Chang Wanzhou's wrist. His actions were very light, as if he was just touching it lightly. However, Chang Wanzhou's actions instantly stopped. Anger was written all over Chang Wanzhou's beautiful face as he gripped the sword hilt tightly with both hands and increased his strength as he tried to resist. However, Qin Yi was simply too strong, and he suppressed Chang Wanzhou completely without batting an eyelid. The moment he put his hand down, Chang Wanzhou couldn't move at all. Realizing that he was indeed not Qin Yi's match, Chang Wanzhou looked up angrily. I don't believe that Qin Yi can't tell what's going on here. Why'd he stop me? It's not enough even if Shang Wanwan dies 10,000 times. Qin Yi's expression had already regained its calmness, and his long and narrow eyes were filled with darkness. We haven't made things clear yet, so don't jump to conclusions. Then, he looked at Shang Wanwan with a gentle expression. We'll save you first. Shang Wanwan was elated as she nodded profusely. After Qin Yi said that, he actually waved his sleeves and threw out a rope that wrapped around Shang Wanwan's waist. With a light flick of his wrist, Shang Wanwan was pulled up. After leaving the area enveloped by the dark green light, Shang Wanwan instantly felt as if she had crawled up from hell. She turned around to take a look with lingering fear, and her entire body was drenched in cold sweat. If I didn't grab that tree root just now and wasn't careful, I would have been the one falling down. Coincidentally, there was another ripple in the air at this moment. A figure walked out from within. Shang Wanwan turned around and was instantly shocked. The person who came was actually Jiang Yuqing. Yuqing, exclaimed Shang Wanwan as she hurriedly ran over and pounced into his arms. Yuqing, you are finally here. Jiang Yuqing didn't notice it for a moment
and was thrown into his arms. He subconsciously put his arms around Shang Wan's waist. Shang Wan cried in his arms. I was so scared. I almost died for a long time. Yuqing, did you specially come here to look for me? Jiang Yuqing knew where she was. Since he had appeared now, he must be here for her. Shang Wan had been through those things before, so she had accumulated a lot of emotions. At this time, seeing Jiang Yuqing, she finally couldn't hold back and burst out. Fear, anxiety. In this short period of time, she had experienced several life and death situations in succession, and her mental state had been extremely tense. Now, he could finally relax a little. The front of Jiang Yuqing's shirt was soon soaked by Shang Wan's tears. Her arms were tightly wrapped around him, and her body was still trembling slightly. It was obvious that she was extremely scared. Even Jiang Yuqing rarely saw her like this. As he softly comforted her, he gently patted her shoulders. It's fine. Aren't I here now? Don't worry. When Chang Wanzhou saw Jiang Yuqing, who suddenly appeared, he pressed his lips together and glanced at Qini. It turns out that he already sensed someone coming. Furthermore, this person is Jiang Yuqing. It's not hard to imagine what the outcome would be if Jiang Yuqing came and saw me planning to kill Shang Wan. But even so, what about Chu Luiwei? Chang Wanzhou looked at the deep abyss in the middle and held the cloud sky copper sword in his hands tightly. Jiang Yuqing hugged Shang Wan and comforted her, but his gaze was darting around as if he was looking for someone. In between his brows, there was a tinge of undetectable worry. Qin saw it clearly and couldn't help but laugh in his heart as mockery flashed across his eyes. He lightly said, Jiang Yuqing, you came quickly. Eldest young master Jiang, you came so quickly. We just arrived, yet you followed right behind us. Jiang Yuqing's expression froze. My cultivation level isn't as high as Qin Yi's, and I'm also injured. Logically speaking, it's impossible for me to arrive so quickly. The most important thing is that I didn't come with the two of them, yet I still came here. Without a proper reason, it definitely can't be justified. Not long after you left, I received Er's call for help, so I chased her here. Jiang Yuqing roughly explained. He didn't intend to tangle with the two of them. No matter whether they believed it or not, they had no right to question him. After all, he and Shang Wan were engaged, and they both had respectable statuses. It was very normal for them to have some trump cards. Then, he seemed to be reprimanding and heartache as he said, Er, why did you send the news so late? We almost went crazy looking for you. Shang Wan knew what she should do at this time. Besides, she also wanted to hide a little. She didn't say anything and just hugged Jiang Yuqing even tighter as she sobbed. Qini looked at the two of them nonchalantly, as if he didn't have any intention of asking. I see. Jiang Yuqing secretly heaved a sigh of relief in his heart as he scrutinized the surroundings in detail. He then asked, Er, are you the only one here? Shang Wan laid in his arms, so everyone couldn't see her expression. Shang Wan nodded hesitantly, and her voice was muffled. This means we've already dealt with Chu Luiwei? Jiang Yuqing was stunned. He felt lost and even a little hurt. It was as if someone was holding a needle and stabbing it into his heart, causing a fine and continuous pain. Actually, he had been very conflicted in his heart. On one hand, Chu Luiwei had probably guessed what Shang Wan was doing. From all aspects, he had to kill her. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble in the future. However, on the other hand, he had been very uneasy and worried. Once he thought of the scene of Chu Luiwei being killed by Shang Wan, he felt very uncomfortable. Originally, he didn't intend to come. However, by the time he reacted, he was already here. Somehow, it was as if he was being driven by something. Jiang Yuqing didn't dare to think too much, as if there was a taboo in his heart. Once touched, it would be a complete collapse. Shang Wan naturally didn't know anything about this. She just thought that Jiang Yuqing really came because he was worried about her. After all, he knew why I came to Dahuang Swamp this time. Thinking of this, Shang Wan felt hatred in her heart. I still have a bit of my Yuan Meridian to recover. If it wasn't for Chu Luiwei, Jiang Yuqing looked down. Judging from this chaotic scene, a huge battle must have happened just now. He furrowed his brows slightly. Weird. If Shangwan Wan wanted to kill Chu Luiyue, it should have been very easy. Why did it cause such a huge commotion? Could it be because of that red-tailed phoenix? Since eldest young Master Jiang is here, take the third princess and leave first. Qin Yi spoke. I'll go and see what's down there. Jiang Yuqing followed his line of sight and immediately understood what Qin Yi meant. He actually wants to jump down into that strange abyss that's emitting a dark green glow. What do you want to do? When Shangwan Wan heard this, she instantly looked up and asked agitatedly. Since I killed Chu Luiyue, I definitely won't allow anyone to save him. Jiang Yuqing patted her shoulder and persuaded her gently and patiently. Young Master Qin should have just... Jiang Yuqing's voice stopped abruptly as he pushed Shangwan Wan away, as if he had seen a ghost. That face, which used to be considered pretty, was now covered in blood and flesh, looking as terrifying as a malicious ghost. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from AI. Net. Chapter 747. Shangwan Wan was suddenly pushed away by Jiang Yuqing. Her expression changed, and anger rose from her heart. Just as she was about to speak, she happened to meet Jiang Yuqing's eyes. Shock, horror. There was also a trace of disgust that was hidden very deeply, but she could still see it. Shangwan Wan was suddenly stunned, and then belatedly remembered that her face had been scratched by the red gold phoenix. Jiang Yuqing was disdaining her face. Shangwan Wan only felt cold all over, and all the blood in her body rushed to her head. An indescribable anger exploded in her heart. Jiang Yuqing saw the change in her eyes and realized that his push just now was inappropriate, so he quickly took a step forward. Your face, how did you get this injury? His words were sincere, and his expression was anxious, as if he was very worried. But the disgust on his face just now had been deeply engraved in Shangwan Wan's mind. There was no woman in the world who didn't care about her face, especially a princess from the Imperial family like Shangwan Wan, who valued her appearance even more. From her hair to her toes, there was nothing that wasn't exquisite. From her hairpin to her boots, there was nothing that wasn't exquisite. Her status was noble, and she was the center of attention. Her every word and action had to be paid special attention. Not to mention her face. With a disfigured face, who knew what kind of joke she would be if she went out? Shangwan Wan had been on the verge of death before, and it wasn't easy for her to survive. She didn't have time to think about her face at all. Now, Jiang Yuqing's reaction finally reminded her of this matter, and it caused a great shock to her. Shangwan Wan sneered. You didn't ask me if it hurt, but asked me how I got this injury first? Jiang Yuqing secretly said that he had miscalculated. Normally, he definitely wouldn't have made such a low-level mistake. But just now, he didn't take any precautions, and most of his attention wasn't on Shangwan Wan, so his reaction was a little more direct. As a result, it turned out like this. He knew Shangwan Wan too well. He was afraid that she would hold a grudge against him for a long time. Jiang Yuqing suddenly felt a headache coming on. He had experienced enough things before, and his body was barely holding on. He had no extra energy to deal with Shangwan Wan. I don't mean anything else. I'm just too worried about you. Shangwan Wan sneered with a mocking expression. Her expression made Jiang Yuqing feel as if a fishbone was stuck in his throat, and he didn't bother to say the rest of his explanation in comforting words. In the past, Shangwan Wan was very gentle and considerate most of the time. This was also one of the important reasons why he liked her. Although he also knew that Shangwan Wan was not as innocent and harmless as she looked, he did not mind. With such a background, it was normal for her to be scheming and scheming. However, in the past 2 years, she had become sharper and more sensitive. She would often hold onto a small matter and cause a huge commotion. Jiang Yuqing had long been tired, and his patience was wearing thin day by day. He let out a long sigh in his heart, tried his best to suppress his impatience,
and persuaded, these are all wounds. These are all superficial wounds. After we go back and apply Bingji ointment on them for a while, they will naturally heal. Previously, Yuji also accidentally hurt her face, but it healed quickly. You can't see anything. Shangguan didn't think much of it and listened to his words as if she was listening to a joke. Of course, she knew that the wounds on her face could be healed. However, Jiang Yuqing's push just now, I will never forget it. He was too lazy to care about the two of them and walked straight over. Chang Wanzhou immediately followed. He glanced at him. To stay there. Even I find it dangerous. Isn't Chang Wanzhou courting death by coming over? Chang Wanzhou moved. After hesitating for a while, he still listened to Qin Yi. I know my limits. If Qin Yi went over, he might be able to bring Chu Luihua back, but if I go, I might just become a burden. Shangguan glanced over from the corner of her eye and saw Qin Yi walking to the edge. She immediately said, "You can't go down." Qin Yi acted like he didn't hear her. Shangguan anxiously said, "It's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's very dangerous down there. You'll just be courting death if you go." Jiang Yuqing also looked over and knitted his brows. It seems like Chu Luihua fell down there. That aura is very dangerous, and Chu Luihua should have gone down for a while already. I'm afraid. Rumble. A loud boom suddenly came from the abyss. Qin Yi's expression changed. The dark green light glowed brightly. A strong force surged out from within. The surrounding black swamp started to surge crazily. Qin Yi originally wanted to rush in directly, but he was stopped by the crazy force outside. At that moment, the world spun. The few of them disappeared on the spot. At the same time, the same scene was playing out in the underground of the mystic forest. Bang! The dull sound of a heavy object hitting the ground was heard. After that sound, it didn't stop. Accompanying it were all sorts of painful cries. This sound made Qin Yi abruptly open his eyes. He suddenly came out of the dark underground, and the surrounding light was so piercing that it hurt his eyes. However, he still bore with the pain and quickly looked around. We're still in the mystic forest. Judging from the messy and broken trees around us, it shouldn't be far from where we were previously. He looked up and indeed saw that mother tree in the distance. Chang Wanzhou wasn't far behind him to the right, and he didn't seem to be severely injured. Jiang Yuqing and Shangguan were in front of him. There was a distance between the two of them. When he looked further away, there were people all around them. Most of them were from the Black Cavalry, and some were disciples from other clans. Qin Yi knitted his brows. It seems like everyone has been chased out. Whose power was that just now? It's actually so strong. Even I can't resist it at all. Big brother. This was Lei Laoxi's voice. Qin Yi turned around and indeed saw Lei Laoxi running over. When he reached Qin Yi, Lei Laoxi anxiously asked, "Big brother, her." Qin Yi cut him off. "Hello, third princess." Lei Laoxi hurriedly kept quiet, but his eyes were still filled with anxiousness and worry. Where's Chu Luihua? I don't know why, but everyone was chased out by a strong force just now. He immediately saw Big Brother here and rushed over excitedly, but he realized that Chu Luihua wasn't here. We've already found Shangguan and Jiang Yuqing, so why is Her Highness missing? Qin Yi's expression dulled. We haven't found her yet. You haven't found her? How can this be? Lei Laoxi suddenly thought of something, and his voice stopped abruptly as shock flashed across his eyes. He then swiftly scanned his surroundings and carefully scanned everyone's faces. No, it's still not. Her Highness is actually not here. Unwilling to give up, he lifted his feet and walked to the other side. At this moment, Shangguan's voice was heard. Everyone should have come out by now. Could it be that those who haven't come out have already... Digression, the fifth update was around 6:30 p.m. She silently jotted it down in her notebook. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 748. Shangguan didn't finish her sentence. That was because Lei Laoxi looked over. This time, he didn't scold her with a hoarse voice and only glanced at Shangguan.
However, that glance was extremely cold. He was originally very capable, and with this cold and fierce glance, he was even more intimidating. Shang Wan subconsciously shuddered, and a tinge of fear grew in her heart. She subconsciously swallowed the rest of her words. However, the hands in her sleeves were already tightly clenched. She looked down and hid the anger in her eyes. When I leave this place, I must find a chance to settle this Lei Laosi. I still remember the scene of Lei Laosi fighting with me previously. I'll settle the old and new grudges together then. Lei Laosi sneered, and his expression looked extremely ferocious and scary. I can see through Shang Wan's thoughts. If I wasn't in a hurry to find Her Highness, I definitely wouldn't let her off so easily. Lei Laosi retracted his gaze and walked forward with big strides. This time, he didn't stop him. Lei Laosi searched very carefully. Even though he remembered Chu Liyue's figure, he still seriously looked at every face that he passed by. Some had their backs facing him, and some were lying on the floor. He walked over patiently and searched them one by one. After confirming that it wasn't her, he then continued forward. Shang Wan looked at Lei Laosi's back view and knitted her brows tightly. She turned and saw Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu. Mu Qinghe walked over. Elder Qiushi also came along with her. He quickly caught up to Mu Qinghe and shouted excitedly, "Mu Qinghe, you're the one who gave me the permission to do so." He said excitedly, "Your Highness, we finally found you. You don't know how worried we were for you for such a long time." Mu Qinghe glanced at him and didn't say anything. She then bowed to Shang Wan and Jiang Yuqing respectively. "Your Highness, eldest young master." Elder Qiushi wiped his tears with his sleeve. "Your Highness, we are relieved to see that you are safe and sound. We didn't look for you in vain." Shang Wan's attention was finally attracted by his words. She frowned and looked puzzled. "Elder Qiushi, what do you mean by that? You guys have been looking for me all this time?" Elder Qiushi immediately recounted what had happened. Of course, he emphasized his concern for Shang Wan and emphasized that it was under his urging that everyone finally decided to come down to look for her. Because these people were not bound by the roots the second time they came down, Shang Wan was not very clear about this. "So that's how it is. Thank you for your hard work." Shang Wan gritted her teeth and said word by word. If it weren't for these people, she wouldn't have been delayed by Chu Liyue. Elder Qiushi was talking smugly when he suddenly noticed that Shang Wan's mood seemed to be a bit off, so he kept quiet. His gaze quickly swept across Shang Wan's face. I wonder what exactly she went through for her to end up like this. Even though Elder Qiushi's gaze was extremely light and his movements were extremely small, Shang Wan still noticed it. The resentment in her heart deepened, but she couldn't flare up in front of so many people right now. She hurriedly took out a scarf and covered her face. Although her forehead and eyebrows were exposed, and the ghastly wounds could still be seen, it still looked much better than her entire face that was torn apart. She looked at Mu Qinghe. Vice Admiral Mu, Lei Laosi, and Chu Liyue seemed to have a good relationship. "Do you know what happened?" Mu Qinghe shook her head and said hesitantly, "Lei Laosi and Lei Laosi have been guarding the nine-eyed beast for a long time. Lei Laosi and the other two have always been in charge of guarding the nine-colored heavenly pheasant. Now that the nine-colored heavenly pheasant has broken through and become a red-tailed phoenix, it has made an agreement with Chu Liyue. It's probably related to this matter. It was fine if they didn't mention the red-tailed phoenix, but the moment they mentioned Shang Wan, she was filled with anger. The mythical beast that originally belonged to her was gone, and it even scratched her face. Now that Chu Liyue was dead, that mythical beast definitely wouldn't be able to live either. This place is very dangerous. We must leave as soon as possible." Jiang Yuqing walked over and said in a low voice. Shang Wan wanted to refute, but she saw Jiang Yuqing looking at a certain spot with a solemn expression. She couldn't help but follow his line of sight, and her breathing suddenly stopped. She saw that the mother tree was withering at a speed visible to the naked eye. A gust of wind blew past, and countless leaves turned from green to yellow before falling down. What was even more terrifying was that after those leaves fell to the ground, they actually silently transformed into puddles of blood. Very quickly, a blood-colored puddle was piled up on the ground, and it was still spreading to the surroundings at a terrifying speed. Everywhere it passed by, everything was silently corroded. Such a bloody and bizarre scene caused everyone to be dumbstruck. Everyone hurriedly got up and kept retreating. "We can't stay in this place anymore. Let's go. Let's go." The crowd was in chaos. Vaguely, someone seemed to be sucking something. Luyu, where are you?" Mu Hong Yu, Yi Ran, and the rest were looking for Chu Luiyue. There were also many black cavalry soldiers who were looking for Chu Luiyue's whereabouts. Miss Chu, you guys search here. We'll go over there." Okay. Almost half of the people in the crowd were looking for Chu Luiyue. Shang Wanwan was stunned by this scene. What was going on? What happened when she wasn't around? Just as she was about to ask, she suddenly heard a cracking sound. She lowered her head and saw that there was a crack on the pure gold armor. Shang Wanwan widened her eyes in shock. However, soon after, the crack began to spread rapidly. Bang! The pure gold armor dissipated. It turned into powder. At the same time, Chu Luiyue was falling into the abyss. Her surroundings were strange and colorful. Her vision was chaotic, and she couldn't see anything. In the blur, a figure chased after her. It was Dumpling. It flew to Chu Luiyue's body and lifted her up. Dumpling flapped its wings, wanting to leave with Chu Luiyue. However, there seemed to be an invisible suction force below, dragging them all the way down. Violent turbulence spread out in all directions. The lower they went, the more terrifying it was. Countless small wounds instantly appeared on Chu Luiyue's body. However, at this moment, her body was suddenly enveloped by a layer of faint golden light. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 749. The golden light enveloped Chu Luiyue's body, isolating the surrounding terrifying airflow. Chu Luiyue's face was filled with astonishment. This is glaze barrier? She could feel that this was indeed the power of the glaze barrier. But why did it turn from silver to gold? Furthermore, the glaze barrier was usually a spherical barrier. Chu Luiyue had never seen a barrier that formed a layer of protection. Rather than calling it a barrier, it was better to call it armor. Yes, it was an armor, with such a tight fit. Other than the fact that it wasn't a real object, it wasn't much different from an armor. Just as this thought flashed through Chu Luiyue's mind, she saw the golden light on her arms suddenly condense. At first, she didn't notice it, but when she saw the strange patterns on it, she finally realized that something was wrong. Why did these patterns look so familiar? Chu Luiyue stared at it for a while, then looked at her body. Indeed, she found that the golden light on other parts of her body was also condensing. From top to bottom, at her chest, a silver light suddenly flashed. Chu Luiyue lowered her head to take a look, and her eyelids twitched violently, because in front of her chest, there was actually a heart protection mirror. Chu Luiyue blinked her eyes, and a trace of disbelief surged in her heart. This is, as if to confirm her guess, the surrounding golden light condensed even faster. Not long after, it completely formed the appearance of an armor. This armor wasn't brand new, and there were many marks on it, as if it had experienced many intense battles. The faint golden color, warm and simple, thick and heavy, it perfectly fit Chu Luiyue's body, as if it was specially made for her, outlining the perfect lines of her body. Chu Luiyue was stunned for a long time. Looking at the armor that suddenly appeared on her body, she held her breath. There seemed to be blood flowing through her eardrums, and it was beating violently like her heart. Chu Luiyue's breathing became hurried, and her entire body seemed to be ignited. Her cheeks were boiling, but her eyes were as bright as the most resplendent night sky. Pure gold sacred armor. This was really the pure gold sacred armor. Originally, She thought that it had been taken away by Shangwan, but she didn't expect it to appear here, on her body. Stars flashed in front of her eyes. Chu Liwa looked up. Countless golden streams of light converged, and finally condensed into a helmet. It was the helmet of the pure gold sacred armor. Chu Yue's heart almost jumped out of her chest. She slowly stretched her hand and held the helmet in her hand. It was cool to the touch, but it also had a trace of boiling heat. An extremely bright light from the top of the helmet's helmet. Immediately, with the light with the pure gold sacred armor's body armor, the armor pure gold sacred armor, instantly like the wind with the wind, everything was as if a layer of dust had finally been wiped off, revealing its original color and luster. The pure armor recognize. It says Chu Luiwe never expected the pure gold armor to return to her side in such a manner. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through her mind. The reason why the pure gold sacred armor didn't recognize Shangwan as its new owner was most likely because her soul still existed. But how did it come about? Chu Luiwe recalled the situation just now and was suddenly stunned. Could it be? Is this really related to the glaze barrier? At the thought of this, she tried to summon the glaze barrier. The pure gold sacred armor was overflowing with light and colors, and it gradually became transparent. It was like a layer of transparent and colorless soft armor that perfectly covered Chu Liuyue's body. Only when one looked carefully could one see the faint engravings on it. This was indeed the glazed barrier, but this was also the pure gold sacred armor. It seemed like, after encountering the pure gold sacred armor, the glaze barrier had changed. These two things had invisibly merged into one, and in the end, it appeared before her eyes in this way. Chu Yue's heart trembled. A scene suddenly appeared in her mind. The day before she left country, Yao Chen's imperial capital, she accompanied Rongxiu to play chess and informed him that she was about to leave and head to the Tianling dynasty. Rongxiu said that the glaze barrier he gave her previously was damaged, so he would give her a new one. At that time, Chu Luiwe didn't pay much attention to it, because the second glaze barrier was exactly the same as the first one. From the outside, there was no difference at all. It wasn't until she arrived at Xiling, participated in the Wanzhong competition, and entered the Tianling God Realm that she finally realized that this glaze barrier seemed to be a little different. Its defensive power was extraordinary. At that time, although Chu Luiwe was curious, she didn't think too much about it, because the situation was urgent. Later on, he gradually forgot about this matter. If the glazed barrier hadn't taken the initiative to appear and protect her this time, she might not have remembered the existence of this little thing. Now that she thought about it, she had a clue. What kind of yuan instrument could easily block the sword aura of a long yuan sword? Although the glaze barrier was divided into several grades, this kind of power was simply too shocking. Even the best glaze barrier she had seen in her previous life might not be able to do this. Rongxiu. Chu Luiwe mumbled softly with a complicated expression. A bold thought suddenly appeared in her mind. Rongxiu, does he know something? Thousands of miles away. In the room, two people sat opposite each other. Pa 36 respected Elder Ming placed his last piece. On the chessboard, the black and white pieces went through an intense battle before the victor was finally decided. 36 respected Elder Ming's eyes lit up. Hee, I've finally won against you, Your Highness. Rongxiu put the chess piece back into the chess jar and looked up with a faint smile. Respected Elder's power is superb. I admit defeat. His words were said casually, as if he had already expected this outcome. 36 respected Elder Ming was originally stroking his beard with a smile. When he saw Rongxiu's expression, his heart skipped a beat. He accidentally pulled out 3 strands of his silver-white beard. You, did Your Highness purposely let me win? Rongxiu raised his eyebrows slightly. No, I didn't. I thought too much and lost this round. Don't give me that. Do you think I can't tell whether you went easy on me or not? 36 respected Elder Ming glared at him angrily. When he played chess with Rong Xiu, he had almost never won. After studying for so long, he did not expect it to end up like this. His joyful mood was instantly reduced. However, after thinking about it, this outcome was normal. 36 respected Elder Ming was relieved. You started learning chess at the age of 5. When you were 6, you had few opponents. After you were 7, even I found it hard to win against you. After losing for so many years, do you think I'm a sore loser? I'm already used to it. Okay. At the start, Rong Xiu went easy on him very obviously. Later on, he gradually hit it very well. If your highness wants to, you can definitely play all the chess players in the world in your hands. 36 respected Elder Ming let out a long sigh. Rong Xiu suddenly chuckled. His thin lips curled up slightly as he leaned against the back of the chair and said lazily, "Not necessarily. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 750. His voice was deep and mellow. With a chuckle, he sounded even more unrestrained. 36 respected Elder Ming lifted his eyelids and took a glance at him. Rong Xiu was smiling. There was a hint of a smile in between his eyebrows, like the beginning of spring. However, that pair of deep eyes wasn't looking at the chessboard. They were silent with hidden ripples, as though he had sunk into deep thought. 36 respected Elder Ming was a little surprised. Rong Xiu was actually a very prideful person. In terms of chess skills, he could be said to be the best of the best. 36 respected Elder Ming felt that his standard was already not bad. However, in front of Rong Xiu, he couldn't even find out his bottom line. At the very least, among the people that he knew, no one could win against Rong Xiu in this aspect. No, it should be said that there was no one who could compete with him. Your Highness, do you mean that there is someone who can compete with you? Yes. Rong Xiu tilted his body slightly and propped up his elbows. No one knew what he thought of, but he suddenly laughed. I have lost quite a number of times. 36 respected Elder Ming was even more shocked. For what he said, he didn't lose because he went easy. He really lost. There is actually such a person in this world. It wasn't an easy thing to win against Rong Xiu. Of course there is. Rong Xiu's smile deepened. However, there was a tinge of extremely faint gentleness in his eyes. However, if we were to meet again now, my chances of winning would be higher. Knock, knock. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Come in, Rong Xiu said indifferently. Yan Qing walked in and bowed to the two of them one after another before saying, Your Highness, 36 respected Elder Ming. The people from a Ming tribe are here. They want to see 36 respected Elder Ming. The Ming tribe was one of the tribes. It was also the clan that 36 respected Elder Ming came from. Because of 36 respected Elder Ming, the Ming tribe's status wasn't low. However, 36 respected Elder Ming's expression changed. He immediately became impatient. Why are they here again? Didn't I say that this old man is very busy and told them not to disturb this old man's business? Yan Qing lowered her head and said respectfully, Respected Elder, after you came out of seclusion this time, they sent people over. But at that time, you were busy discussing important matters with the other revered elders, so you didn't get to meet him. Now that they've heard that you've finally returned from your travels, they've specially rushed over. These bastards definitely didn't have any good intentions. It's fine if I don't meet him. Go back and tell them that this old man is in seclusion. I don't have time to see them recently. Every time they asked to see him, nothing good ever came out of it. Who knew why they were here this time? One had to know that not long ago, Rong Xiu had personally led an army to wipe out a division. Weren't they just looking for trouble by coming here at such a sensitive time? Missing. They were all gone. Yan Qing hesitated for a moment and said, Respected Elder, the news of you and His Highness playing chess for a few days is already spread outside. They also know about it. Otherwise, how would those people dare to block him here? 36 respected Elder Ming was extremely frustrated. Seeing his reaction, Yanqing knew that it was best for her not to say anything else. But she had to say those words. In the end, she could only bite the bullet and say, "They also said that they'll continue to wait for you here. Whenever you're done with your work, you can just meet them." 36 respected Elder Ming was so angry that he blew his beard and glared. In the end, he could only leave. From the looks of it, those people from a Ming division couldn't avoid being reprimanded again. A long time after he left, Rong Xiu sat up straight. He moved his wrist, and a crystal barrier appeared on the chessboard. Sunlight shone in from the window and shone on the crystal-clear crystal barrier. It was bright and moving. Then there was the second one. Then there was the third one. Rong Xiu took out a total of 6 crystal barriers and placed them in a row on the chessboard. He looked at the crystal barriers in front of him and laughed softly. "I didn't expect it to be so fast. I've refined so many for nothing." He refined these crystal barriers according to different levels and wanted to give them to her gradually. But when he knew that she was planning to go to the Tianling dynasty, he was worried and gave her that one directly. What he didn't expect was that she would actually— Rong Xiu's thin lips curled up. Actually, this was within reason. After all, it was originally hers. It caused these glass worlds to have no place to be used. Yanqing stood at the side and quickly raised his eyes to take a look. He saw that his master had waved his sleeves, and those crystal barriers were silently turned into dust. A light breeze blew, and those flying dust instantly flew up. Then it dissipated. She quickly lowered her head. Master had spent a lot of effort to refine these crystal barriers. Now, they were all destroyed. Could it be that Miss Lu Yu's side keep all these? Rong Xiu said lightly. Yes. Yanqing hurriedly went forward. Looking at the faint marks left on the chessboard, she faintly felt her heart ache. These were all top-grade crystal barriers made with the best materials and personally refined by her master. If they were released, who knew how many people would be willing to go bankrupt just to get one? What a pity, what a pity. She had followed her master for so many years, but the number of times she saw her master personally refining yuan instruments was few and far between. And most of them were for Miss Lu Yu. Her actions were clean and nimble. She quickly cleaned up the chessboard and retreated. When she reached the door, Yanqing paused for a moment and asked again, "Your Highness, the people from a Ming division, don't you plan to meet them?" Those people from a Ming division had always been restless. No one knew why they were here this time. Although 36 respected Elder Ming was suppressing them, they were his clan after all. He was often restrained because of this. Rong Xiu laughed lazily and said casually, "They asked to meet 36 respected Elder Ming. After killing the chicken to warn the monkey, the other divisions were much more well-behaved. Even if they wanted to cause trouble, they had to reconsider their own abilities. Moreover, with 36 respected Elder Ming around, they couldn't cause trouble." Yanqing lowered his head and replied, "Yes, I will take my leave." After speaking, he respectfully retreated. After closing the door, the room fell into silence again. After a while, Rong Xiu looked in front of him. "Come out." A huge white figure flashed past. It was Xue Xue. She walked in front of Rong Xiu and lay on the ground. Only a pair of icy blue eyes stared at Rong Xiu. She looked very lovable and lovable, which was a rare sight. God knows how much she had been holding it in during this period of time. She missed her so much. Ah! Rong Xiu glanced at her indifferently. "You seem to think that this move will work on anyone." Xue Xue's expression froze. The paw that was about to act coquettishly froze in midair. She didn't know how to continue. After being stunned for a while, she angrily retracted her paw. She angrily tilted her head to the side and let out a whimper. She wanted a warm and soft hug. Rong Xiu's gaze turned cold. "Dream on, Xue Xue." Rong Xiu continued. "Oh, right. I forgot to tell you. She has found little Nine." Xue Xue suddenly raised her head and opened her eyes wide. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.